We will, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item, or the actually third item on the agenda is we need to make an agenda amendment. Today there were two things, as long as we're making one. One was just a typo kind of thing under new salary schedule. It's at the very bottom on the table agenda that you have, new salary schedule approval. Did not have the words action item after that. Should we choose that? So we need to put that in. And then as long as we're doing that, what I would also like to do is add after the trustee continuing education, I would like to add the recruitment process next steps. So we can just have a little discussion about what's happening next. So that is, that's what I would like to see added, and I need a motion.
We modify today's agenda to reflect new salary schedule approval to be an action item and add a section for recruitment process.
Okay, it's been moved to amend the today's agenda to include the words action item after new salary schedule approval and to add the topic recruitment process next steps to today's agenda. Is there discussion?
So I had checked my emails and it showed up this morning, but I checked my emails on 11/14 for the compensation information and didn't see it. I see in there that today that it came on 11/10, but anyway, I figured it wasn't a big deal, you know, whether it was there or not, since we weren't voting on it.
We put the word action item that gives us the opportunity to vote if we want to. We can't vote if it's not there. So this gives us the opportunity to, but it doesn't mean we have to.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Okay, then it's been moved to amend today's agenda to include the words action item after the new salary schedule and also to add the topic recruitment process next steps after trustee continuing education. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, is there any nays?
Nay.
A nay? Okay. All right. Then the next item on the agenda is public comment. I'm gonna give my little spiel beforehand. So the public library, our public library is founded on the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And that's exactly what we're all doing here today. We're gathering together to freely speak. The two most important things I want us all to remember today are to be respectful of one another and to be civil to one another. We may not like what someone is saying, but we all need to listen and let them say it without interruptions or distractions from the audience. Please, let's treat people as we wish to be treated if we were up there speaking. I'm going to also read from the policy itself. The Community Library Network Board of Trustees operates under the Idaho Code of Open Meeting Law. The board will be pleased to take comments under advisement, although we will not be responding at this meeting. Let's see. When addressing the board, let me see. Comments may be also submitted by writing or oral presentation. And the board is committed to conducting its meetings in a civil, orderly, efficient, and productive manner. When addressing the board, please remember these things. There's a few others, but please remember these. The speaker may address only library-related topics. Comments should be addressed directly to the board and not to the audience. Everyone will get 3 minutes. A person may speak one time during the meeting. In cases of disagreement, the speaker must use grace and tact. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe a level of civility and decorum appropriate for a public meeting, and no personal attacks or disruptions from audience members will be tolerated. And this is no personal attacks on other members of the public, library staff, board members. And the board chair may terminate or redirect any presentation not adhering to these guidelines. So the first person on our list to speak is Gideon from Post Falls.
Good afternoon, I'm Gideon Telford. I live here in Post Falls. First, I would like to say how much I appreciate the staff here. They always come through with hard to find books, movies, and resources. Along with that, the staff is always welcoming and happy to help. They genuinely seem interested in helping people however they can, no matter. They are definitely deserving of a praise. Secondly, I hope the community library network will find a director that supports and represents all members of our community, from our most vulnerable to most privileged. There aren't many places that everyone in the community can use, but the library is one of those places. They're where all people can and should feel safe. Having a director that understands that is crucial. Lastly, did you know that you can check out a Dremel, a telescope, and a stud finder here? That's pretty cool. But I really don't need any of those things from my library. What I need from this library, what I need from this library, from this board, are policies that will ensure this library will stay free from censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Tippert.
Michelle Lippert. I live here in Post Falls. I'd like to begin by thanking you for your dedication and service to our community. When this amazing building was opened in 2000, my husband, I, and our two sons were some of the community volunteers who moved books into their new home. It was a great day. I've been a voracious reader from a very young age. In third grade, my parents enrolled me in the Nancy Drew Book of the Month Club, and another one that had biographies of famous people written for children. By fourth grade, I had discovered the Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan novels. These were not written for children. My mom looked a bit surprised, but she approved, so I got to read them. As I grew older, I started reading more and more adult-themed novels. When I was 13, I was at my grandparents'. Looking for something to read, I found Exodus by Leon Uris on the bookshelf. If you're not familiar with the novel, it's a story of the founding of the state of Israel, and it has accurate and horrible descriptions of the Holocaust in it. My grandmother, an elementary school teacher, saw me reading it. Her eyebrows went up. She said, "You're reading Exodus? If you have any questions, come and talk to me about it." I continued my reading adventures with novels like James Michener's Hawaii, George Orwell's 1918, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. My parents drove me to the library, knew I was reading adult-themed novels, and approved. When my sons were at Post Falls Middle School, they would come home with a list of books. They were to pick one, read it, and write a report. In general, I'd look over the list and make some suggestions. I did, however, strongly encourage them to read William Golding's The Lord of the Flies. I told them that it basically described their lives. It is one of the books most frequently challenged and or banned in the United States. Both my sons read the book. I tell you these stories for a simple reason. The persons responsible for monitoring what their children are reading are their parents, and sometimes their grandparents. The choices my parents made are not the same choices another parent might make. I strongly encouraged my sons to read The Lord of the Flies. Another parent might not want their child to read that book. As a library board, your responsibility is to create a diverse, rich collection. You should have The Lord of the Flies on your shelves. If a parent wants their child to check out that book, then that can be done. Or not, if the parent doesn't want that. It's that simple.
Michelle, I'm sorry that time is up.
It's that simple. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Angela Druin?
Druin.
I did it.
Hi, I'm Angela Druin from Hayden, and I'm here with a group called Right to Read Idaho. We're here to present the board with a petition. In less than a week, we've collected 89 signatures from local residents, and the petition reads as such. We are a community that stands for inclusion. The public library should serve our community, all of it. LGBTQ plus people, people of color, Indigenous people, and other minorities and their families have a right to be represented and included in the collections available to patrons through the CLN, just like everyone else. We are all a part of this community. Removing items depicting minorities and their culture, segregating items into their own section, or adding cautionary labels are acts of exclusion. According to Katie Brereton, the CLN's lawyer, the Constitution protects the right of the people to not only disseminate information, but receive information and ideas. Libraries have historically protected the right for people to receive that information or those ideas free from judgment. Ms. Brereton also pointed out to trustee members that the library cannot, consistent with the principles of the First Amendment, contract the spectrum of available knowledge. Therefore, we petition the CLN board to, number one, maintain a collection that represents minority members of the community that is integrated with the general collection and separated by reading level, not by content. Number two, affirm that it is the responsibility of an individual, parent, or legal guardian to make content-based assessments about what is right for them and their family. That an individual, parent, or guardian's right to assess what is right for them does not extend to them assessing what is right for others. Number three, assert that it is not the responsibility of the CLN as a government entity or its employees to draw conclusions regarding content. Number four, to exclude any language in policies that could potentially undermine or criminalize library staff for disseminating information or ideas to those who request it as a course of their regular duties as library staff. Furthermore, we call upon this board to support library staff and afford them the ability to work in a supportive environment. We require policies to be made free from the personal biases of trustees regarding religious and political agendas. Political wins should not dictate the direction of a library or its collection of materials. We support policies that protect the freedom to obtain materials on a diverse range of subjects. We support policies that protect library staff. It is your duty as a trustee to defend the right to read, our right to access, and the tenets and ethics of professional librarianship for our community. I use the library all the time. I use the library generally. I homeschool my children from it, and I love going to the library. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next person on the agenda is Suzanne Kearney, but I'm struggling with this because I know that she has indicated she's not here. Is that correct?
Correct.
She has indicated that someone else would read the email that we already received. And we have a policy here. We don't read the emails that we've already received. So that if that would be unfair to do to the hundreds of other emails that have not been read here. So for that reason, I'm going to exclude that. But Mariana Cochran, you are next on this.
This is the Idaho Commission for Libraries Guide for Board of Trustees. On page 3, the boardmanship responsibilities. Good library board members learn what's going on in the library community, and they bring this input with them to board meetings. Trusteeship is a working relationship with the community, library staff, and fellow trustees. Effective trustees have rapport with the community, respect for the opinions of others, and the ability to work cooperatively with others. Page 92 of your guide gives a diagram on community and public relations. The library board represents the needs and desires of the community to the library staff and represents the needs of the library to the community. If the board fails in either direction, then it is failing to do this part of its job. So given those weighty responsibilities, I want to acknowledge the CLN board for the recent change to the materials policy of adding forms of expression that are unprotected by the First Amendment will not knowingly be included in the collection. Unprotected materials are those that have not been declared obscene by a U.S. court of law. Materials for minors under the age of 18 that violate Idaho codes 18, 15, 13, 14, and 15 will be excluded from the juvenile and young adult collections. I appreciate that this board has finally recognized the inappropriateness and unlawfulness of obscene children's materials. I'm curious, however, about how the collection staff will be developing and implementing the exclusions that you voted for. Interestingly, Boundary County has adopted a new collection policy committee, which includes citizens. Since this board's and the library director's charge is to incorporate with the community, as I just read, I propose a similar committee for our community library network comprising of volunteers randomly chosen on a rotational basis to help CLN not only choose books, but to conduct the exclusion that the board has just committed to. So back to your guide, page 87 states the important policies that every library should have. Collection development. This describes the kinds of materials that will and will not be added to the collection based on community needs and interests. Well, so what are the community's needs and interests? Earlier this year, CLN had a survey conducted, likely at considerable expense, to gather the community input. All of these orange survey highlights are patrons dissatisfied with the children and teens collections. That's quite an abundance. I would love to have been able to read them to you, but there's not enough time because there's so many. So back to your guide again. On page 28, golden rules for board members. Complaints from the public are the library director's responsibilities. In closing,
Marianne.
the recent policy change is a start to address those complaints. This group of stalwart citizens
Okay, that's
will
enough.
continue to be watchful, and the new library director should know that we'll continue to be just as participative, if not more so.
Thank you. Teresa Borenpat.
That's a hard one. It's Teresa Borenpol. And good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Dr. Teresa Borenpol, and I'm a resident of Post Falls. When I think about books that my nose gets stuck in, I think about two categories: those that expand my experience and books that affirm my experience. And as a child, books that expanded my experience were titles like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, read to me by Mrs. Patrick at Berean Christian School. And to this day, I can't imagine opening a closet and getting taken away to Narnia by the winter winds. But as a child, the books that I loved the most were the ones that affirmed my experience. I was a pretty unkept kid with an overdose of moxie and the inability to stop talking. I was often the example in my elementary school of who not to emulate, which put tiny cracks in my soul. The most innate version of Teresa was often reprimanded, but I didn't see other kids like me in my classroom, but I certainly saw them in black and white print of pages by authors like Judy Blume and Ramona Cleary, who colored my world with understanding and with acceptance. There may not have been characters in my classroom that matched my movement and imagination and ability to socialize, but they were certainly out there, and Ramona was my soul sister. Today, my reading habits have not diverged much. I still read to expand, I still read to affirm. I'm currently reading a book called On Earth, We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And I knew with a title like that, On Earth, We Are Briefly Gorgeous, that I had to absorb from that author. So different from me, but so far I'm so much more expanded. But when I think about the books that I read as an adult that affirm who I am, I realize exactly why I'm drawn to this podium today. I'm here because of books like The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, who helped me to understand that families are complex and filled with hope and guilt and love and misunderstanding. And I'm here today because of books like Educated by Tara Westover, a woman who fought tooth and nail for an education that she desperately wanted but wasn't provided by any traditional means. And I think about why I'm here today with books like Heartland by Sarah Smarsh, a book which affirmed my desire to better the lives of children while not having children myself. And time again, we all stand in this room in unison and in opposition. And when I think about the books that made me, that affirm me, I was thinking about the books that affirm everyone else in this room. And I wonder what they are, because this is a room of familiar faces. Even in opposition, we're a community. Even when we disagree, our lives are threaded together. And it makes me wonder what books have made all of you openly weep. And it makes me wonder what books have made you laugh out loud and what books have made you momentarily close the book because the narrative became too intense. And what books made you want to shake awake a sleeping partner as you reached an aha moment while reading in bed. I would love to better understand the books that affirm the experiences of those in the room whose worldview brings them here to ask that some experiences not be reflected on the shelves of this incredible community asset. I want to learn about those experiences because, thank you so much. I would never ask for anybody's books that affirm their life experiences to be taken off the shelves. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Anita Dubchik.
Anita Dubchik, Rathdrum. I believe that the majority of this community supports a board that would be mindful of children and what is being introduced to them in the library setting. I get the policies of not removing certain books from library shelves. I don't agree with those policies. So what I would again suggest is that books that detail divisiveness of perceived racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, transgenderism, etc., be housed in a separate area of the library so children don't unknowingly pick up something that may harm them. If you've been listening to school board meetings and the news in the past several months, you've heard what many teens and even young adults are saying about the beginning of some of the journeys that they are now on, journeys that are harming them. And yes, these resources definitely played a part in decisions made by these vulnerable youth. The CLM libraries create displays for Pride Month. Are displays being done for other sensitive or controversial issues such as the National Day of Prayer in May to encourage the power of prayer, or a Constitution Day display in September to showcase the beginning of our amazing country, which was founded on biblical principles? Please reconsider including books that deal with very sensitive subjects in our culture today in the regular collection, and provide them in an area that allows parents and guardians to know that they may need to have a conversation with their children. I believe because this CLM serves a conservative leaning area, this community will support you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers today. That is the last person that has signed up. So we will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is our facilities annual report by Randy Zepeda. How do you pronounce it? Zepeda? Sorry, Randy.
He's using the projector.
Oh, you're using the projector? Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want his report while he's giving it?
Everybody knows me, just in case some of the new board members, I'm Randy Zepeda, the facility manager for the library district. One thing I want to do this year.
Sorry, doesn't apply to me.
So one of the things I want to do this year is explain, I'm sure you guys have a spreadsheet, why I created it. So I'm gonna kind of go through that, why I created it and how I went about creating it. Just real quick, if I start talking too fast or not clear, just stop me here. Because I tend to start talking too fast, so. So when I accepted the job, I knew that there was no facilities department or facilities manager, so. We're looking at how to build a department. One of the things I noticed is we didn't have a facilities capital replacement program specifically for facilities department. And if you don't have something like that, your facilities department's fine to succeed. One of the things you gotta, so it's referred to as firefighting or reactive maintenance. It's very costly. Again, you have to have some program in place to be able to combat that. You can read some of the studies. I mean, like DOT said 8 times the cost other than planned maintenance. This is my attempt at being humor. Is you don't want to have a an Oliver Twist approach to facility management. In other words, like the scene in the cafeteria when he comes up and asks for more. So again, you don't want to come up and keep asking for more money because it's just not an appropriate way to run your department. Again, my attempt at humor. You can't just make things up. You actually have to use something to quantify. Like have this in your spreadsheet. This is one of the things I'll use. This is a board of engineers that get together and they'll project on how long a piece of equipment should last. I love it. It's pretty accurate. And it's not like it's just anybody making it. It's a board of engineers that are qualified in projecting these. Most importantly, you can't manage what has been measured, so I can't figure out what I'm gonna do, what I'm gonna budget for if I don't know what's there. Get into philosophies too, because you gotta use that. I'm not gonna go through everything on that, but you gotta have some kind of direction. Just look at different ways, how can it fail? This is more streamlined because the other one can be pretty complex. Really, to be effective, you want to use a lot of controls and computers, but very costly when it makes sense for us here. Maybe if it was a company that made like the widgets, it's going to be costly for them to break down. Then yeah, you would want to use a lot of computers and data confirming what's going on. But like facility like this, it wouldn't make any sense to do that. One example, like when you're deciding priorities and what needs to be replaced, is the bottom one. It talks about, like if we had backup power for a server compared to domestic hot water, power to the server is going to take priority over hot water. It's kind of a weird, like it's kind of gives you an idea of what will take priority over the others.
Randy, you'll be in hot water either way.
This is true. Some of the strategies, primarily we're going to use run to failure. I mean, that's a legitimate strategy, but you can't necessarily use that as an excuse. So if something fails and you didn't notice it, you say, well, that one was set to run to failure. You actually have to legitimately use it, and preventive maintenance would be the other. Predictive and condition-based maintenance is extremely costly, very effective, but again, in our setting, that wouldn't make sense to use that strategy. I think it's a bit more idea of the run to failure. Preventive maintenance is just that. I mean, we essentially just kind of replace it. Like, you know, that using one of the tools like the ASHRAE sheet that says it's going to fail in 20 years. Well, then in 15 years, you start talking about again, budget for that or not. You just get it replaced before it fails. Because typically, like on an HVAC, it's not going to fail in the summer. It's going to fail in the middle of winter. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much it of the slides. I want to go over the spreadsheet a little bit. And the biggest thing, one thing I did miss on this spreadsheet is it's truly just a tool, a living document. These things can change priority. Sometimes anyway, but definitely often. The big thing is it's just a tool. I didn't create the spreadsheet to say to admin or to the board, hey, we have to spend this kind of money in the future. It's just that's just a discussion point. Start talking about it. The red are the stuff that is in this year's budget. Blue is that proposed carry forward that we're starting to be going over. And then the black is in those potential future projects, things that will probably need to be coming up. One thing, if we get a break, if you guys go outside and look at the difference between, we started the lighting project here, so about half of it's done. So you look at fiction and nonfiction, that's going to tell you the difference of the light levels, and it's incredibly different. So I guess if anybody have any questions on what's on the spreadsheet.
Hang on a minute. So when it says, budget replacement for, and those are years, 1, 3, 5, and 10. Does that mean that's when it's going to happen or that's when it needs to happen?
I wouldn't say there's necessarily anything on this sheet that needs to happen. And the purpose of the 1, 3, and 5 is that wiggle room in between each one of those years. So I would say in the 3 years is something we seriously got to start talking about. When you go into the 5-year projections, that's really pretty far out there. It's just to kind of get under the radar. Like the heat and roof was a perfect example. We've been budgeting for that for years. But that allowed us to do that rather than going to admin, hey, next year I need, $150, $60, $180,000 to do a roof. It's just not, in my opinion, appropriate to do.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? No.
So I was just looking at the things down, the projects like the children's room. So I was looking at all the stuff in black, the children's room remodel for Post Falls. And that is, so it says it needs to be done this year. So in 1 year is right.
Yeah,
That's kind of what.
That's a typo. So probably should have moved that over. It's just one of those things. We talked about it. It's not in the budget. We do have a request. So there is a donation there. It's just in the very beginning stages.
Okay, all right. So so then the rest of them these are talking points, but they will be things that will be coming up that need to be addressed.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I
I'm just trying to eliminate any surprises. I mean, there's no way you're gonna eliminate all the surprises in facilities. It's impossible. But we need to make a good effort at it. It's when you go to conferences, it's kind of a joke, what percentage of deferred or reactive maintenance do you have? It's high or low, depending on which one they're asking, and kind of shame to walk away. Because you definitely don't want to have a lot of deferred maintenance, because that's also very costly. But you also don't want to have a lot of reactive.
Is the bequest for that whole amount?
So for the children's room, yes, the bequest hopefully will cover most of the amount for the reconfiguration. There may be a couple of other small projects that we may want to do at the same time. So, but that's still, we haven't budgeted for it yet because we're still having the architect look, and it probably would be in next year's budget.
Yeah, and I should not put it in that title. That should because it's going to be the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not really sure when that'll happen.
Okay, well, yeah, it took my breath away just for a minute, but then I saw bequest, and so.
Well, yeah, at least one, but,
Yes, Judy? Oh, I'm sorry. Regina.
Go ahead, I didn't know.
I was really glad I didn't have my glasses on, so I thought it said request. When I looked at the bequest, I'm with it. Randy, this is really helpful for our planning purposes. And what I'm looking at here is cost estimates, which is the current cost estimate.
current, but that's going to change tomorrow.
And it probably isn't going to go down.
It's not going to go down.
So part of what we need to think about is, as your timeline goes along, the number that you put in here for 3 years out.
Yeah, it's probably not even
Yep.
accurate.
And it's not to suggest that they didn't do it right. It's just the reality of how, the kind of thinking we need to do as a board to get ready for that. 3 years out, we need to start budgeting for it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's slowing down. I mean, just like in the lighting projects, there was 4 or 5 times in a year that there was price increases that we hadn't heard of before.
And delay time is fine. Okay, well, all in all, this is very helpful. I think, rebates or grants is a good column to have. It's important, that, especially the electrical stuff, you may be able to get some rebates and grants, and thank you for continuing to stuff.
Yes, and we're in the process of, well, there's a potential rebate from this stuff, for this lighting project.
Agreed, it's all, but we won't know to ask for or get in line unless you've already begun to say,
Yeah, I've already got it.
watch for it. Yep, thank you. Good.
Oh, well, thank you, Randy, as always, for your thoroughness and being proactive about facilities management. This may have been part of prior proposals that have come before the board with respect to the Hayden remodel. But I wondered if you could, just a real brief synopsis. This is a pretty big number, the remodel of the Hayden workroom, what that would entail.
So going back to the safe room, because that's the only library at this point that we haven't created a safe room like the original, and this was prior administration, so these things went in. And then they need a bigger workroom there. There's just not enough room for staff to do their job. And that's kind of a combination thing. That's going to be a big discussion. Or I don't know if it even happened. 3 or 4 years, my thought was before that would happen, just because there's so much involved in there. You wouldn't want to do something that makes sense, to make it staff easier to work and also have that safe room.
And I think the price tag was just what we had from the original version of the project. I think the idea is that that version isn't what was needed or what staff wanted. So it could very well be cheaper than that, more than that. I mean, but we wanted to also, because Roxanne, who's the Hayden manager, has been there now 10, 11 months. So we wanted to give her time to kind of get in there, work for a while and really see what's still needed, if anything. But we do know that there does need to be some reconfiguration, whether it's a small reconfiguration or whether it's a little bit larger. Seems like there is something that needs to be done there. So it was really kind of a placeholder, but that dollar amount was from the prior estimate.
Another question is, we talk about projects like this, you mentioned our new manager. I think it's an important factor to have, but also don't our projects include the staff that works within the area? It's not just the manager. It's a team effort. I think we do well in the library, but I think that's a really important part because we'll need all the ideas we can get. And they're amazing places that they'll come from. And as you live it and work it, walk it, more things happen. So I'm glad to hear that the entire staff and sometimes even somebody coming from somewhere else and walking into it is another aspect to present to it. So bravo.
Wasn't it the whole staff that said, we don't really like this project? Yeah.
That's what it's.
Yeah, it was the entire staff at Hayden that said, yeah, this
We
isn't
need
it.
more.
Yeah, we need to rethink this. Anybody else have anything else that they would like to say? This is a far cry from what we used to have, which is nothing. We didn't have any kind of planning. And I think you'll go down in history for, you can't manage what you don't measure. I mean, I realized it wasn't your quote, but we think of it as you. Yeah, it is. Anybody else?
Just commenting, again, many of the things that also factor into seasonal timelines, so it isn't budgeting that we just get figured out now. It's in terms of what weather will permit it to happen. I think that all the board can be counted on to pray that there's not much snow this winter to slow down the budget there.
You did pretty good last year.
Yeah.
All right, if that's it, then thank you very much, Randy. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
And Katie,
Yes.
before you do that, we do need to remove one item from the consent agenda.
Okay.
The minutes of the CIN meeting from August. When CIN met last month to approve those meetings, we did not have a quorum, so they have not been approved yet by CIN. So we usually bring the approved minutes to the board. So we will bring those hopefully again next month for approval.
Because you did that, because you're talking about that topic. As I remember noted there, I think the minutes reflected the wrong date of the meeting. So while you're looking, I noted it was page 1 of the CN meeting minutes of August, am I right?
Yes, August 17th.
So your new business at the bottom, the last bullet point. No meeting in August. Make sense of these minutes that are August 17th minutes. Did I miss something?
All right. So when we vote on that next month, we'll bring that correction to them.
That's an easy one to fix.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair, I had a couple other, I think I'm ahead of Regina.
Go for it.
Okay. Meeting minutes of a regular meeting on the 17th of October. 3. I think you said.
17, 18, are you talking about 18?
Minutes of regular meeting of October, 17th of September. I'm
September?
sorry, September of October, 17th of October.
Okay, there are no minutes for the 17th of October.
So listed here.
So there's a typo on the agenda.
Okay, all right.
They
It's
should have
the
been in
18th.
October.
It's the 18th. The minutes themselves say the 18th.
Okay, let's go to those amendments then. It looked to me like they were on page 3. Where we were talking about adding and repairing. Sorry. Huh. Let's see, you have yours handy, I can't have mine.
I didn't get my packet.
Okay. Well, I won't take time on it to find that. Minutes of the special meeting of October 24th, look like page 2, add question here. No, I can't find it.
Well, you look, Judy,
Yep.
Regina, do you want to
Maybe you
talk
can
about
look
yours?
at it, Regina. Thank you.
You know, I didn't have one, any changes for the October 18th. I don't think I found what Judy was gonna bring to our attention.
I can't even find it. Yeah, I think, I think I collected all my stuff.
All right, I had one for the 24th.
Yep.
You want me to go ahead?
Page 2?
Yes.
Look at page 2?
Yes.
Did you put it on page 2?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead, please.
Go down, about halfway down the motion that failed. Says Meyer, okay, see. Four lines down where it says Meyer asked what the code was. Austin noted the code was the exemption for libraries to disseminate materials. Of course, we disseminate materials. It was, I was talking about materials that are harmful to minors. So harmful to minors should be added to that. And then I had a clarification, not to change the wording, but just wanted everyone to understand. In the paragraph above that, it says Addison stated that PLA encourages libraries to use ALA undergraduates that would be free. I was just stating that because I was not 100% sure whether we were doing that or not, but I certainly was not encouraging it because it seems dishonest. So I'm glad that we're not doing that.
Okay,
Judy, if I mind, thank you. And again, it was page 2 in the section where the motion failed, second paragraph down.
this is the 24th.
Yep. And it's about the third sentence from the bottom. Allison knows this change is only policy, does not change law. McCready stated added these terms, and I assume that should be adding.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up.
Oh, okay, thank you. That was the one I had there.
What was it?
I think it's just a correction to say the word motion or the comment, as McCready stated, added. I was changing the word to adding.
It should be adding.
That.
Yeah, it should be adding instead of added. McCree stated adding these terms is confusing. And that's, while we're on that paragraph, the
Right.
very last sentence of that paragraph, Beely believes it is confusing. There's no is. And then in the paragraph above that paragraph, about halfway through where Vanessa's comments were being discussed, there's just a fragment that says a sentence sentence about the board will evaluate whether staff appropriately use the policy during the review process. So you guys, are you with me? When I read that, I thought it was just a fragment, like a sentence about that should be added, or anyone find that? And Vanessa, it was your comments, I believe.
That was added, that,
So maybe it should have been a sentence should be added about the board will evaluate whether, because that's what we ended up doing, was
Yes.
adding that sentence.
So if we're gonna add after a sentence, say a sentence should be added. Does that make sense, Vanessa?
Yeah, it does. I think me reading it, since I was literally there and discussing it, it makes sense to me, but I see where it wouldn't otherwise.
okay.
Those
Any,
are-
any other changes?
Those are the only changes I had. I did have a comment just about the board reports, which are always very thorough and illuminating. I love reading about what's going on at the library. And page 10 with the little girl in front of the fire truck that he autographed for her. Well, he didn't autograph the fire truck, but he autographed the books that he read during story time. I mean, wow, that was just such a cute picture. And I love that nobody in Spirit Lake knows where the book drop is, and those, at least the indoor one. So I just like to thank staff for continuing to provide us with these excellent board reports.
Yes, Judy?
I want to endorse that. I found, we prepare for meetings, this is the highlight of reading materials. Is, wow, good things are happening, and really delighted and appreciative of what they're accomplishing under always challenging circumstances. I did find my question, immediately it's clarification. It's these are the October 18th minutes, after the beginning, right, it said page 3. And this was on the bookmobile report, so on the top of the page, Karen was telling us about her activities. The last sentence is Meyer would like more information about the handicap lift on the bookmobile. I remember talking about it, and good note taking. I don't know how you keep up with it now. Here, my question was, I think we heard that it was not working right. That the book, the handicap lift wasn't working right. So my question had to do with, can we get it repaired? It seemed like that ought to be working. Am I remembering correctly, the bookmobiles lift didn't work right?
That's correct. Yes, Karen did mention that, and that's kind of been something we've examined a couple different times. It's kind of a big price tag, and so the thought has been, yes, I mean, it's important, and we want to do that, but then we've also been weighing that against the life of the vehicle as well, because it's several $1,000s, and so we wanted to. But we have, I mean, this is something that I think Randy and I may have talked about right when I started, and then, you know, that there were some other projects that took precedence. So I think, you know, it was duly noted here, you know, your comment, and we'll certainly continue.
And
to
that's the
look at that.
reassuring part, with all the double pieces, which one's falling down and hitting you on the head first, is what we gotta deal with. I didn't want it to go, that you weren't tending to it, and I'm reassured that you are. Now, it's just hard, because the rest of the bookmobile is accessible, just as part. Yet we don't want to be discriminating against folks who can't get on the bookmobile. So thank you, that answers my question. Now I'm done.
Okay, are there any other comments or changes to the consent agenda?
Just some suggestions for the library reports. I just thought that it might help us associate the name to the face, and maybe there was a little thumbnail picture.
Oh, for the, oh, okay.
And the other thing.
Of the person writing?
Yes.
The manager.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, oh, yeah, okay, now.
That's
I remember
actually-
who that is. And the other one is that the pictures that are contained in the library reports, that sometimes they disrupt, you know, like the sentence going across, so it's, I don't know, it's not really a big deal, but it would make it easier to read if the sentence just went all the way across and maybe the picture was over on the side.
Okay.
And typically we have tried to do that, but I know occasionally, particularly in youth services, there's a lot of pictures. So.
Kids are cute.
And then just a note, there were a couple of reports that didn't quite make it in, so they're in your table packet if you didn't see those. So,
And are they all on one emerging technology line? Is there both the two that are missing?
it's right there attached to emerging technology. So it should be, I think, on the back page, should be Hayden and then Pinehurst.
And thank you so much for putting in the board reports, that those reports were missing, because I do count them, because if I'm anything, I'm thorough, and I want to make sure I've seen the report from all of them. So that was perfect, seeing that, you didn't quite have them and you recognized that. And we did have our board meeting earlier this month, so I understood why they weren't there, but I'm really happy to know that it's on the table.
And they will be included with this motion.
It isn't comforting to know it wasn't you that was missing. Yes.
Okay, so, any other discussion on the consent agenda? Then a motion?
I move that we accept the consent agenda with changes and additions.
Okay, it's been moved to accept the consent agenda with, changes and additions. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So the next item on the agenda is the Community Library Network October 2022 financial statements. It's your green stuff. We are 8.33% of the year gone. So any questions, concerns, concerning these financial statements?
Since I didn't get my board packet, the one thing that I particularly would like to see, could I get a copy at some point of the finance?
Yes. And Michelle, I can track your board packet because it was definitely mailed and I have the tracking number. And so I didn't know till now you didn't get it, but I will definitely track it.
Okay,
and
yes,
see where it's
I
at.
told Lindsay because I didn't want to burden you.
It's fine.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, any comments? Any comments? Amy, do you have any comments?
I mean, it is the completion of month one of the fiscal year, so you can kind of see that reflected. So obviously on revenue, we don't get our first property tax statement until mid-January. So you'll see that also reflected there, you know, that revenue was low for the first few months. But otherwise, and then some of our payments, you know, happen either quarterly or semi-monthly. So you'll see some categories are not going to be directly at 8.33% because we may have made a quarterly payment. And so that's going to look like, you know, 25% was covered. So for example, the courier, we pay that only 4 times a year. So, but otherwise, you know, mostly on track in month one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just had a question, it's not about the numbers. Under revenue, the income for Post Falls Friends grants, talks about team giving, which sounds like an awesome idea. Wondering, is this an appropriate time to elaborate on that?
Sure. So this is a teen program that happens right around Thanksgiving, where they kind of invite the teens to come have essentially, I don't know if it's a full-fledged Thanksgiving dinner, but it's very close. They do kind of their own. So it's almost like a Friendsgiving, but Teensgiving. And that happens here at Post Falls Friday. It'll be this Friday. So, and I'm looking to our youth services team. So thank you, Karen.
Anything else?
Just again, appreciation for the first sheet that helps define what's happening and the categories. I need to read it each month, so thank you for telling me what's happening or going to happen, been happening. In the page 3 description of expenditures, the last item, training, conference travel, expenses this month, so I'm help with you. Includes some staff participating in homeless training for all staff. I was just interested in learning more about that.
So there is a training that we subscribe to. It's we pay just an annual fee. It's a virtual training. I think it's through Niche Academy, which is now a portal that we use for a variety of different staff training. But we had subscribed to this even before we We had access to Niche Academy. Ryan Dowd has done a variety of different trainings for library staff. And it's not just, I mean, that's what the training's called, but it's how to serve a variety of different patrons. So it talks about safety and security type issues. It talks about how to de-escalate situations and so forth, how to deal with sensitive issues that might come up. And so, so many of our staff, particularly, I think it's been well used at Post Falls and Hayden. It's been, but all of our staff have access to it.
Just an observation. I was intrigued, and I think it reflects the real world, which is the homeless training. And I know occasions you read nationwide, where libraries are providing shelter for a lot of folks all day long, sort of thing, because it is such a national issue. And then I think you mentioned also the, well, the homeless training over the years at Hayden, where we had situations with that. I remember our staff had information we could give to the homeless folks to say, here's where you can go get shelter, food, whatever, to facilitate folks finding a way out of the situation we can't fix for them. The other one was a safety issue. This program includes safety issue. We talked about the safe room. We still need one at Hayden. I'm sober today. I was on a conference call, included the University of Idaho and some of the tragedies going on there. And, you know, frightening, but we need to pay attention to that too as a board to be sure we're taking care of everything we can this end. Does this do that? Do we need to do more with it?
It does provide some safety training. We've certainly looked, and actually Lindsay and I have been exploring a few different organizations to come in and do some broader safety training. So I know it's been a few years. The library had a few years ago an active shooter type training, but there's other types of training, you know, whether it's that per se versus some other types of safety training. But we've been kind of exploring what would be appropriate, but we've tried to incorporate, you know, some different tools and training.
And it's very painful for a library to have to spend money to do that, but I think it's appropriate, and we as a board need to continue to pay attention to that issue.
Okay, any other comments or questions concerning the financial statement? The statements, then we need a motion.
I move that we accept the Community Library Network financial statements for October 2022.
All right, it's been moved to accept the Community Library Network financial statements for October 2022. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda are the community circulation statistics.
Those were also in your table packet. So again, kind of this meeting coming a little earlier in the month, they weren't available to be mailed, but you'll see them there in your packet. And again, first month of the fiscal year, so first month for tracking, but you can see some of the comparatives to last year. But yeah, it's been a nice busy month.
Any comments? Any questions?
Concerning Friegel, has that had an uptick at all?
So we had some big bumps in Friegel, I think, in 2000 and 2001, and now it's kind of seems to have been slightly tapering off a little bit. I mean, so usage is still decent for that resource, but I think, yeah, definitely not as high as it was last year. And I think we saw that with a couple of our digital resources that, you know, when some of the in-person services, say in 2020, weren't fully offered, you know, we had patrons kind of migrate to some of those virtual and online resources. But now I think, and I'd have to go back and look, but I think we're close to what we were kind of prior to 2020. So, but yeah, that has kind of subsisted a little bit. And is this one, remind me that CIN was giving it one more year? Is it Friegel or is it? I don't remember.
It's been on the hook for a few years,
Right.
and then we had COVID.
Yeah, I think a few months ago, we discussed at CIN that we were going to give it one more year in terms of usage and just see if there was another either streaming service to replace it with that we could offer to the community or another type of resource.
And Madam Chair, it seems to me that's what we would want our staff to be doing, evaluating every place that we spend money, this being one of them that's been kind of shaky. Have you had any sort of communication with the provider to say what's happening? You're gonna get your act together, you know, without saying those words. What do you hear?
Well, I think this is more kind of individual patrons either choosing to not use it as much, you know, or not. So it's right. So the usage that we count here is on how many songs are accessed and downloaded. So this is just kind of showing that there hasn't been as many uses or downloads of those songs since last year.
Okay, anything else? Circulation statistics are not anything, we don't ask them or anything. So the next item on the agenda is the director's report.
Sorry, our camera hasn't been working, so we're using a makeshift camera over here. So I'm trying to get people as they speak. Yeah, I just had a brief report. So I'm not going to spend too long because otherwise I'll get kind of emotional since it's my last board meeting. But certainly just had a few things that I wanted to say. And I think first of all, I really appreciated the opportunity to be here the last year and a half. I've appreciated the support of our staff, board, community, and I know we've been through a lot as a library. So this last year, and for complicated family reasons, not able to stay. But one thing I wanted to say is how much I enjoy this staff. We have really amazing staff that come to work every day. They do a great job. They help everyone that comes to them, regardless of what they're looking for, of what they're doing. They do amazing programs, they do amazing services, and they deliver great customer service every day. And I'm really pleased and hopeful that we were able to look at the compensation study, because I think our staff really do deserve to be compensated for their efforts and their service. And sometimes, the library, our mission is to empower discovery. We're here to provide resources of all types. Our staff try really hard to not make judgment about anything. We have a strict confidentiality policy. We're here to help people find whatever it is they need. And we're here to help families find what's appropriate for their family. But as we've heard from a variety of public comment at different meetings, what works well for one family is going to work very different from another family. And the library is only here to provide that access and not make those moral judgments. That's really our place to not do that. If an individual staff member that's ordering books was doing what their personal beliefs, our collection would look vastly different than it does. But that's not what we do. We really are here to serve the community. And libraries, and I'm biased, play a really vital resource in our communities. Every day our staff are helping people fill out a resume or learn how to use a computer or help kids discover a love of reading. And I'm really proud to be associated with that. I'm really proud of this staff. And so I really encourage the board to, as we get close to looking at that compensation study, to do what we can to help move our staff forward. But again, appreciate the opportunity and just wanted to take a few minutes to share that.
Thank you. Anybody comments?
Thank you, Amy, for your wise and diligent leadership. We wish you well, and thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I agree. Thank you. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda will be the strategic plan update. And that you got in your packet. And would you like to?
It's going to take me a minute to set up. Do you want to, should we do our break now?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay?
Let's take a break.
Okay.
Compensation study. Milena is going to Zoom us, and apparently she's going to Zoom us from an airport because she's traveling. So I will let Amy direct us for all of that. But at this point in time, we're at strategic plan update.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share briefly, you can see up on the screen, but you don't need, we just wanted, this isn't, this is essentially the work plan. So we had talked about, with library strategies, one of the options with our strategic plan was to have them help facilitate an implementation planning session. And the implementation plan is really the staff work plan. So the board had approved the strategic plan with the goals and strategies, but now this was helping us kind of set some timetables and some itemized objectives under each strategy. So we really just wanted to show you that we're working on it. This is getting down now into kind of the operational and the weeds, but we really just wanted you to know that we had a really good implementation planning session with library strategies. I'll just kind of give you an example. So
Can you blow that up at all?
um,
Enlarge the picture.
okay, that's a little bit too big, sorry. Okay, so we'll move back over here. So like I said, typically library strategies, it says the implementation is primarily for the staff, meaning that typically this isn't included in a board update because we really focus on the dashboard and where we're at with those goals and strategies as a whole. But because we did take them up on this option, we just wanted to share with you that it did happen, that we do have an implementation plan that we're working on. And let me get this a little bit easier to read. And so under the first goal, deliver unique and responsive programs driven by community needs and interests. Strategy 1 was expand programs for adults and seniors. So basically what we looked at here, and I'm going to get this up. Okay, so basically, one of the things we're going to do first is identify what we're actually already doing, because we can't necessarily expand if we're not aware of all of the current adult program offerings. And then the next item is to identify strengths of our current programming. And then, one of the next item is create a program to reach maybe an audience that we're not already reaching. And then we have a strategy there to then schedule and deliver a unique program at each location. So something new that they haven't tried before. And then so basically we have what is the actual objective, what's our tactic, like why are we doing it? And then who's responsible. Sometimes we've put just one person here, but really it's going to be a whole team of people. It's just who's the point person. And then kind of what's our time frame. And I had to back out a little bit so I could kind of see here. So we have, are we starting that in Q1 of 2023? Is it in Q3? And so forth. So like I said, the spreadsheet was not designed by me. It was designed by Library Strategies. So it has some kind of funky features here, but this is really helpful. This is not something that we actually have done before with a strategic plan. I mean, even though I hadn't been here for prior, usually we had the big broad document, and then we kind of just left it up to each team or manager to just be like, well, go for it. And that's pretty common actually with strategic plans and libraries. So we thought this was really useful because it helps us to be constantly reminded of what were our goals and strategies and what are some ways we're going to go ahead and meet those. And so we'll be reviewing now. They led us through the implementation planning session, but now this will be up to kind of our team here to kind of keep it going. And, we can adjust the timeframes as needed. This is a 3-year plan, but the idea that this plan is 2023 through 2025. So most of this isn't starting till Q1. So we just kind of wanted to show you that it happened. And this is kind of what it looks like. And then the other thing we wanted to give you an update, what you will see much more regularly is the strategic plan dashboard. And so that was in your packet. This will be where we kind of can gauge where we're at with each of the goals and strategies. And so there's kind of red, yellow, and green means exactly that. Kind of red will be that, we haven't started yet or it's been delayed. Yellow means that we're moving, forward. And then green might be that it's already completed or on track. So right now, because the plan technically starts in Q1, the only thing that I adjusted was on the very last page. The first strategy there where it talks about the staff compensation plan, I did move that to yellow, that we're kind of in progress. And maybe that will be one that will actually be somewhat on track, here in the next few weeks. So this will be something that as there's updates to each of these, Lindsay and others will be kind of bringing back to the board as there's progress to share. But this is just kind of a nice tool. It's also available if it'd be easier to look at, in an electronic document, we can email it out when we have updates, but otherwise it'll be included in your packet as we have updates.
So questions, comments? I have one. How often should we ask staff for this without being too, high pressure, but, what would be a good timeline to be receiving the dashboards?
I would say probably quarterly, because a lot of these are following quarters in terms of their completion. So, so it's saying Q1, Q2, all of these different things in terms of on our end, when we're implementing. So right now, you'll probably not see much progress on anything till at least January or February. So we probably wouldn't need to bring it back next month, because most of these tactics aren't starting till 2023, so January anyway. So I would say that mid-quarter, we could bring that back, but I would say probably quarterly would be a good amount, unless there's been just a ton of work, and then it may make sense. We have a lot to update you on, so we're going to bring it back next month as well.
Okay, this would be invaluable talking point for us, and that's why I'm asking. I mean, it's really, this was one of the. It's not a particularly complicated, but it is not something we were doing before, and this is a far better way to track how our strategic plan is working than what we've used in the past. So, anything else?
I too was being it's good to have. It helps us know how we're doing and what we need to do and how to fund it. Really is our role in this, and working with the director on don't forget this and this. I was thinking that what we've seen with our branch reports usually is reporting to one of the directions that we've set up, goals. And so will this change that format a little bit as folks tell us how they're doing on these topics?
Not necessarily. I think we've still worked with the managers to, we've asked them to start including the new goals. And I think, even last month, we had some that were including some goals from the prior strategic plan. So we have everybody kind of switching gears to the new strategic plan. So I think there'll be multiple ways that we'll be updating the board. So one will be through the library board reports as individual locations and departments are achieving some of these goals, but then we'll use the dashboard maybe more on a quarterly basis to say, okay, as a library district, here's how we're meeting these goals, and kind of to see that bigger picture.
I'm sorry, and this is the dashboard, is that what you're saying?
Yep,
So
that's
we'll
the
be getting
dashboard.
this
This is what you'll get.
quarterly with the little marks moved, okay.
And also it says on the, write comments here, but it reminds us, so we can begin to look at, okay, what is happening in that area? What programs are, if it's expanding programs, what programs, what has happened?
And for me, it would be helpful then to have some numbers beside these things, and not that's necessarily dashboard, but just thinking about if we don't know where we started with whatever number or description of activity, then how do we know we've made progress? So here we're starting out with a blank sheet in some ways. There isn't always numbers exactly, but we see it with children's programs. They've grown and then we have more people attending. Or we've outreached and used 14 ways to do the outreach. I don't want to describe how you measure it, but it helps me as a board member, and I think our board, to say, we made progress here because we can see it with some definition of what we do, how did it happen? Versus just saying, oh, well, we're bigger now.
And I think for some of these, certainly it will make sense to include some number reference. Otherwise, it might be more, okay, we've added, 3 partners and here's who the partners are, or we've expanded programs to to job seekers, so it might just be as much as that. And here were some of the programs that we started doing for job seekers, so it could be something so it may not have numbers necessarily, but it's saying what are those tangible areas that we started doing.
And I think that helps us network in the community. If we know of some of the groups or things that are happening that we can connect to, or as board members, bring back to our staff saying, well, don't forget these folks. Or did you know that this is going on somewhere? Just because it's hard for our staff to keep track of everything. I think that's part of our responsibility. We're ambassadors for the library saying, good stuff's happening. Come partake or regroup because it's not being well perceived by the community.
Okay, anything else? Anybody want to make any comments on? All right. I think it's great. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the carry forward discussion. And we have a sheet in our packet concerning the carry forward. Yes, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have a couple of documents in front of you. So one, we have the September year-end reports because we thought, as we're talking about what we're allocating, I thought it was helpful to talk a little bit about why we have the carry forward that we have. So I think it'll probably be best if we start with the September reports.
Okay, what does it look like?
So it was
I got it.
right underneath the carry forward proposal. So it's not in green like the financial reports usually are, but it was part of that. So as we look at the revenues, so this was kind of one of the big areas. If we look at line 18, total revenues. So we, in our budget, had anticipated essentially 5.7 million in revenue, and we received 5.92 in revenue. That was primarily, we saw that in sales tax that came in almost 95,000 over budget. And then we had a few grants that came in over budget, donations that came in, kind of some of our property tax replacement. So these are back property taxes, property tax relief. So some of these came in higher than anticipated. So, but overall, we had about 220,000 in extra revenue that came in this last fiscal year. So that's part of where some of the carry forward came from. And then then there were some areas, and we had talked about this a little bit as the kind of year moved on, where we did not fully spend those categories. So in line 25 for salaries and benefits, you'll see that we were well under. We ended the year 3.24 million in salaries, and we had budgeted 3.39. That was primarily, well, a few things. We had 2 positions that we just could not recruit for that sat vacant a whole year. So 2 positions, that was our admin assistant position. We just hired here in October. So it was even after the fiscal year ended. So we didn't have an admin. Well, I think we had somebody in there for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, I think. Yeah. So we did have somebody come and start for about 3 weeks and then left. So that was 12 months of that vacant position. We had a youth services position vacant for 12 months, a 28-hour position at Post Falls.
And are all those based on salary difficulties?
Some, we're not exactly sure. Like the youth services we have several 28-hour positions at various locations, and for some reason, this one, we got all sorts of applicants for others. We would occasionally get somebody that would accept and either had a better offer or decided not to relocate here. There's lots of stories that, so these are just things that you can't predict. And so because in terms of recruitment, and then we had a few other positions
Because
sure.
we can predict if we're not offering a strong salary.
Well, yes, and I am sorry, what I meant more of the prediction is that it would sit vacant for you might predict that it could sit vacant for a couple of months, but it was really unusual to have positions sit for a whole year of being unable to recruit. And then we've just had, as Melena mentioned in the last presentation, we certainly have seen some significant turnover this last year. So just with even smaller vacancies, that's where we were well under in our salaries. So that's another 160,000. So if you're kind of keeping track, we had 220,000 in extra revenue, and then we had 160,000 unspent in salaries and benefits. In our programs, materials, and services, we were somewhat under there. That was primarily, we were under in our, let's see, this is our telecom and internet access. These are those ones where we can't, we get state reimbursement some years and we don't get state reimbursement. We happened to get state reimbursement this last year, so had budgeted like we wouldn't get the reimbursement. So there we were under about 65,000 total in that section. And now I'm not going to probably be able to do math going forward because I kind of added the, but you can kind of see the running total there. Our facility. Oh, yes, absolutely.
When was the last time we did?
Janelle, I'll look to you.
You can get back to me.
State reimbursements, we started getting just a couple of years ago when the state had surplus. The first year they offered it for just the non-E-rate portion of your expenditures. The next year they offered it for mobile hotspots, but they didn't have enough money for everyone to apply for both. So you only got one. Even if you applied for both, you'd only get one. Last year was the first year that we applied for both and received both. So we got reimbursed for the hotspots that we check out to members. So that was a first.
And so because that's only been a couple of years, we have still continued to budget like that pot of money from the state may not be there,
It sounds erratic also.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's not a stable amount.
Right. Let's see, and then moving on to line 60 is our facilities maintenance. And so we had talked a little bit about that there was some facility projects that we had to put on hold, and you'll see some of those facility projects when we talk about suggestions for allocating the additional carry forward. And so, so we had a few lines that were under Pinehurst, Post Falls. Those were projects that either because of the vendor or because of timing, we couldn't get them to do that specific project in time. So that one we were under about almost 50,000, in facilities maintenance unspent. And then in general operations, also overall, we were about 50,000 unspent. This was primarily in some of our training, though we did send some staff to some national conferences. Travel ended up costing not quite as much as we had anticipated there. And then in legal and professional, we had a couple of big projects, our strategic plan and compensation study. The strategic plan, not the strategic plan, the compensation study billing, because it's still ongoing. They're going to bill us the rest of it in this fiscal year. So we had budgeted like we would have fully completed that project in last fiscal year. So we were under a little bit there. And then we had a big couple capital projects that were also put on hold. That was the Harrison remodel and a couple of other items that again you'll see in the carry forward discussion. So there we were, that's also where we were quite a bit under. And then we had the berm in Hayden that we've decided not to do. That was budgeted originally in capital. So some of those projects have been scratched, but some of them you'll see in the additional carry forwards discussion. So you can see kind of at the very end, line 84, when it's current revenues less current expenditures. At the time of this report, which this report was written in anticipation of the October board packet. So we do still have invoices that come in after that fact, September invoices. So at the time it was roughly 694,000, but you'll see on the additional carry forward, that number is slightly different, and that's because we had some invoices that have since been paid since we had that. So that was just a little bit to kind of show why we have the amount that we have in the additional carry forward. So any questions about kind of where that money came from?
Actually, my question is just that last figure you said, where on the carry forward 2023 is that actual number?
Oh, so it's at the very,
Oh, okay.
it's on page, the back, maybe on the back of the
The
carry
total
forward.
assigned carry forward, is that what it is?
Yes, the 609,157. And there's also some, what doesn't take into account in the September year-end reports was restricted donations. So that's included in that, but so we've taken that out.
Taking that out from the 609.
No, well, yes, I mean, so that's not in the 609. So actually, if you look at that last page, and I'll go ahead and go over that now. So this is kind of showing kind of what we ended the year with.
Okay, wait a second. Which page are you looking at?
So I apologize. It's the last page of
Right,
the,
that's what I was, okay,
So
so
it's-
now we've moved to the carry forward sheet and it's the second page that she's talking about.
so here now we're kind of running through where the total amount we ended the year with, which was 2,737,592. But then we still have 43,000 that were for accounts payable. So already kind of invoiced for. And then we had 205,191 that were restricted funds. So this is where we're taking out accounts payable, we're taking out restricted funds. And then we always do need to budget that Q1. And so the estimated Q1 expenditures are 1,839,901. And then we had already assigned a portion of the carry forward, 40,000 to, I believe that was to the Post Falls lighting project. Or was it? Yeah, we'll have to, we'll pull that out, but that was already assigned to one of the capital projects. And so what we currently have then was if you kind of minus out everything that we need to kind of keep the library running, then that leaves us with the 609,157 that we now need to kind of allocate. And then we'll have a budget hearing when the board decides to do that in December or January to then adjust the budget accordingly with the additional carry forward. So now we're getting into where we're proposing for some of the additional carry forward to go. And before we go into that, it might be helpful to look at kind of more of the narrative, I think, because then we can talk about the justification for each. So now if you go to the front page of the carry forward 2023 proposal, you'll kind of see where we're asking for or suggesting for the carry forward to be allocated. Any questions before I start with that? Okay, just want to make sure I'm not rushing through it too fast. So the first area is legal and professional. So overall, we want to increase that category by 38,575. And the first is for the remaining fee for the compensation study. So that unbilled portion of 14,575. And then the second will be, this is an unplanned expenditure, so to speak, would be for the payment for the executive recruiter. So that June Garcia's contract is the 19,000 plus the 5,000, up to 5,000 in travel expenses, so 24,000. So those are the two items that we'd be asking for an increase in legal and professional. Any questions about that? Okay. And then the next item, and Elena's going to talk about this a bit more, but because she's, we were first going to have her present and then talk about the carry forward discussion, but she is, we were working around her flight schedule. So we wanted to go ahead and have this discussion first. So the proposal that you'll hear from, or the plan, the compensation plan that McGrath Human Resources Group is putting forward, does necessitate, if we want to adopt their temporary measure, because they kind of gave us two phases, so to speak. To do that, we had already set aside $135,000 to address the compensation study. So we're looking at an additional $60,000 here. And so we would want to increase salaries by up to $60,247, the salaries category. And then benefits, our medical insurance we had estimated that it would come in high, and it came in even higher. Mm-hmm. I think we had estimated a 15% increase, and Janelle, what was it, 17? It was a 17% increase in premiums. So we are asking for an additional $16,000 to go to our benefits category, and that's primarily for the medical insurance increase. And that renewal came in after the budget year. So we did kind of, Janelle kind of step back to them and ask them why we didn't. It would have been nice to have a little more of advance notice in terms of budget planning, in terms of that increase. So that's what we're looking at for salaries and benefits. And that will kind of, Melena will talk a little bit more about kind of the cost overall of some of the plans she's looking at. But this was when we did the exact numbers of what we needed, because we are going to put a couple of the new positions we had put into this year's budget. We're going to put those on hold because we would far rather address compensation for staff we currently have versus add. So one of the positions we had looked at, and I think, that we may need to put on hold may be our graphic designer. And then we may also need to put on hold one of our increase in hours for youth services, but we're still looking at that. Will kind of depend on, so some of these are things we may need to put on hold, but we're still looking at how that's all going to shake out with the additional salaries. But we wanted to be able to do what we could for salaries, and then hope that we could address those staff needs still in the next budget cycle.
Amy?
Yes.
The 17% increase on medical, is that any change on the actual policy?
No, that came the exact same policy. And last year, when we faced a 15% increase, we did go out to the market. Kind of that had been the first time we'd gone out to market for a few years. We're with Blue Cross, and there's not a lot of competitors in North Idaho for an employer of our size. There might be if you're a much larger organization, but being kind of a small organization, there was one other insurance company last year that we found, and we did do a cost analysis, but it was so close that it wasn't worth moving everyone's insurance for the little bit. I mean, and it was extremely minimal. It was very equal in most cases. So we felt it was still too soon to go out to market this year based on that, because year to year, not much has changed. Next year, maybe a good time to just try again, and see what else is out there. But and also we kind of received it late enough that we weren't sure we had enough time to do that full analysis anyway.
I'll jump in on that one because over the years, I was on the Blue Cross board years ago, and it's almost predictable that one year Blue Cross will raise their premiums, Regions will ride behind. And the next year Regions raises theirs and Blue Cross is behind. And over the years, that's almost always been the case. So it's a tough time for consumers, whether it's individual or businesses.
Under salaries and benefits, the taxes that are increased by $5,000+, those were from, are those?
Those were employment taxes, and I remember why, did we just implementing raises?
Yeah.
Okay, so as we increase salaries, then, taxes are a percentage of salary. So as we're going to increase that salary line, we need to increase the employment tax line as well.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one was in internet access. We had received, fortunately, our E-rate soon enough in the budget process to know that we were getting it, but that only goes through July. And in our excitement to get that, we applied that we were getting that E-rate for the full fiscal year and not just 9 months of the fiscal year. So we do need to rectify that and increase that line by 5,373 since the E-rate is only approved through July. And then in telecom, we had added some additional hotspots through our IMLS grant this last year, but that will expire during this fiscal year. Well, actually, we had prepaid our telecom, and so that prepay will expire, and so then we will be on the hook, so to speak, for that additional telecom expense to cover the hotspot monthly access. And so we did need to increase the telecom line by 33,800. Questions? Oh, go ahead.
I just think that's a grant. Looks like that's a grant. So can we get a line for another grant?
We could. It was an IMLS grant, which is a federal grant, which is not necessarily difficult to get, but it was a really time-intensive grant process. And we just did the year-end report, so we could certainly do that, but there's no guarantee. I mean, I think this was the first IMLS type grant we'd received in a long time. So, and their focus changes every year. Last year was on digital divide, but this year, I can't remember what the theme was, but it was, I mean, not that they don't have some funding for digital divide, but that was their big focus last year. So.
I'm sure you don't need board members to remind you to check for grants, so.
Yes.
And it's cost benefit ratio. And it takes so much time, have we gained enough to make it? We understand, we just want to cheer you on.
So the next items are in repair and maintenance. One we're looking at is for Harrison. We're looking at an increase there in 16,000. This is an estimate to put in an accessible ramp. So right now, the main entrance to Harrison is not accessible. I think we talked about that very briefly when we were at Harrison this summer. And it's not as easy as we had hoped because the sidewalk there for the entrance is at a full 90-degree. And so there's really no way to just turn that into a ramp. So they're going to have to come up. They're going to have to curve it around. So the architect has come up with some preliminary drawings, but and we haven't even started. All we did was have the architect come up with what would be the plan for an accessible ramp, but we would be looking at about somewhere around 16,000 for that. And then for repair and maintenance for Post Falls, this was one of those projects that we didn't get to this year, was repair of the concrete in the parking lot. And so that's 16,500. And then another project that we couldn't quite get contractors to get up there for was Pinehurst, doing the outdoor painting for 12,800.
And that's for the building, the exterior.
The exterior of the building. Yeah. And then the only increase that we're looking at for capital is about 4,000. The Post Falls lighting, we had budgeted 40,000 and it's coming in. Even if we do get rebates, I think it's an additional 4,000 to us. And so we're asking for another 4,000. And those were really kind of the needs that we saw at this point. So we are taking, or we would be using a big chunk of CARF this year for the Hayden roof. So because we do have this opportunity, we're then asking for kind of the remaining to go into CARF. And some of the projects that will be upcoming, so obviously doing the Hayden roof, which we've budgeted in this year's budget to come out of CARF of $185,000. It very well could be above 200,000. In fact, we've already been working with Randy on, let's just do, because the bid threshold changes at 200,000. And so we don't want to assume it's going to be under 200,000 and have fallen the bid process for under, and then it comes in over. So we're going to follow the bid process of assuming that it's over 200,000 and follow that process. So it very well could come in well over 185,000. Also, the next big project, and this will be another well over 100,000, would be the Post Falls HVAC. It's been limping along for quite a while. If we do the Hayden remodel, even if it's not 130,000, could be somewhere between 75 to 130,000. And then we could potentially have some vehicle replacements in the next 2 to 4 years. So really, yes, we do have a decent amount in CARF, but compared to other kind of particularly libraries and organizations of our size, we actually haven't, it's a decent amount for considering how many facilities we actually own and how many capital expenditures we actually do have. So that would be our case here, would be to kind of replenish what we may already be using this year plus some. So those are kind of our suggestions on the additional carry forward. Any questions, comments?
I have a question. I may just save it for when we get to the salary discussion from McGrath and their report, because I have some thoughts there. But just commenting here on the proposal of the carry forward, I mean, it's always a good idea to put money in the CARF, but I guess I'm curious as to the thought process of when, obviously you read that report and you see how far out of market the consultants say we are. Why aren't we trying to bridge that gap a bit more at this point in time? And I'm also mindful of the fact that this board has been very reticent to using carry forward for salaries, because that is an ongoing expenditure and you can't count on having additional carry forward for the following year. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I just wanted to include that prefatory statement in my question, because it's a weighing.
And I think you've answered it partially. It is that we can't anticipate this I think is now maybe year 3 of having some additional carry forward at the end, but that had not been something that had been happening prior to the last 3 years. So we can't necessarily anticipate that. The other thing is typically with, one-time expenses is typically where we've leaned with the additional carry forward. In this case, because it is a unique time in that we have the data from the compensation study, but anything we add to the salaries and benefits line now, we need to be prepared to add to it next year. So we've already increased our salaries 135,000, which is more than we typically do. I think we've typically done it fluctuates somewhere between 70 to 100,000 is typically when we do regular increases. So we certainly, if the board wanted to do that, we do have the one-time funds here, but we would need to be very mindful of, once you increase someone's pay, we've now committed to doing that. Next year, we can't say, we don't actually have enough money and, we're taking everybody back down. We certainly wouldn't want to do that. But if the board felt like that's what they wanted to do, we certainly could do that. We just weren't sure that was a direction that we wanted to head with one-time funds, and adding that, we have added some increase. We could certainly look at what that would take, but it felt like that might have been too much of an add to a single year category. But
You're talking about jumping up to their full recommendations, not using the interim plan. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is there's a gap there. I'm not saying you jump to the end, but it's some sort of abbreviated or sliding scale, and you have to find a balance. And so I think I'll reserve the rest of my questions for when we get to the compensation section of our meeting.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on their carry forward?
Just thank you. It's very helpful to have input from the staff on what you need and the priorities. That's helpful too, because sometimes we can't go all the way down the list, but it needs to be in priorities. And Regina, I was saying the same thing you were. If we hopefully make a big step this year, and then we commit to that forevermore, but we're still not where we're supposed to be. So then I'm going, how are we going to get to the next step and step and step so that we do get there? So it's almost like a dog sitting in the car. What do you do when you get there? I can't wait for that problem. But it seems to me that's a toughy issue that we as a board are going to need to address, and we welcome your input from what you've seen both elsewhere and now with what you've seen here. to get us, getting going in that direction. Thank you for that.
And I think Melena could talk, I'm not sure, because Melena and I have had a couple of in-depth conversations, and she had sent me a number of costing documents, so I'm not sure she put in the final report, the cost of the full plan. I think she might have, hold on. And she'll probably say that, but I believe, so it was close to 200,000. So if we add the 135,000 that we already had budgeted, plus another 60,000, we're looking at about 195,000 to do kind of the temporary phased plan. I think it was going to be 300 to 350,000 for the full recommendation.
I don't think we have those
Okay,
numbers.
and I think she may be talking about that in her presentation. So sorry if I drop some information that
But
she,
that's the point of what you're teaching us is the numbers we're talking about now are just to catch up. Now let's get ready to keep consistent or even be leading edge instead of the bottom edge.
The catching up is the total. The numbers that we are looking at right now are because the total's breathtaking, because we haven't dealt with it for so long.
Which means we aren't there yet.
No, not at all.
How do we
We're
get
heading
there?
there, right.
It's the toughie part.
Well, one of the ways of getting there is to start.
One foot in front of the
Yeah,
other.
right. I would like to talk just a minute about this. This document is fabulous for me. Thank you. And, I loved how it was put out here, and then this page, it's a fabulous template to leave for us, which is really great.
Is it in priority
no, it's really was lumped by
category?
category.
Right.
So I kind of, so, I mean, if it was priority order, salaries and benefits would be the first
What
one.
would you do now for priority? To us, I think clearly it's salaries and benefits.
Yeah, that's what
Yes.
she said.
Yeah, so number one would for sure be salaries and benefits. The next would be things that are like encumbered or promised. So legal and professional, we kind of have already signed contracts for both of those. So I would put those as number two. And then that would probably be similar for our internet access and telecom, that those are, we've already committed to access, providing that access, that internet access. And
There really isn't any choice not to have it. is there?
Right.
Okay.
So I'd probably put, in terms of low priority, repair and maintenance isn't necessarily low priority, but we always have some flexibility there. Because sometimes even this last year, we had projects that popped up that we hadn't budgeted for that took precedent or priority over, when you have a leak in the roof, which, just to make another case for the Hayden roof, last week with the big snow, it started to leak right on some books because of so we're limping along to April or whenever we'll be fixing the roof. Now they were able to get up there as soon as they cleared the snow. That kind of helped solve the leak.
The are special.
Yes, exactly. But that's definitely something we're keeping close.
And as Randy highlighted to us too, things, does the leak get bigger or does it leak somewhere else? They're not done. It's just a matter of having some dry powder to deal with these things along the way. And that side, we need that cushion, even though I don't want to, how do we balance it? I think that's a good discussion. And prolonged discussion, maybe month to month on some of these things, because something will come up. We'll have to deal with it. Maybe who buys lottery tickets? Anybody?
Sometimes.
Counting on you, but that's what we're counting on.
Is she gonna share?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay, any more discussion on carry forward? All right, then let's move to the compensation study, and I
And
don't,
I don't know if she,
If
let me
she's ready,
check
but-
these, actually, yes, there she is. So hold on, let me get hooked back up.
so she's gonna be up there.
She is gonna be. We will ask her. Melina.
Hello,
Can you hear me?
afternoon. How are you?
Are you home or are you at the airport?
No, I got home about 20 minutes ago. The stars aligned with the travel today, and I'm like, and I have 20 minutes to spare. So,
All right, just a second. We're going to get you up on the big screen.
okay, that's not a problem.
I'm ready for my close-up.
Okay, we have you up on the big screen, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for accommodating my my schedule here. I literally just got home from a 2-day event in Kansas. What I'm going to do here this evening is, hopefully, if I've done it correctly, I'm going to do a screen share here. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm just going to swap it so that you see everything. So, all right. So the last time we talked, about a month ago, I was giving you an overview of what our market findings were and the type of schedule that I was developing for you. And since that time, I have completed the salary schedule with the recommendations, and I have provided that to administration so that they have seen what those recommendations are. I have another PowerPoint presentation here this evening we're going to quickly go over some of the areas just to refresh your memory that we talked about a month ago. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the recommendations and see if you have any questions for me. All right. So this is all refresher just from when we talked about a month ago. What we have done with the study, we've used the same methodology that we use with all of our projects, and we have a very consistent methodology that engages the administration, the library managers, and even to some extent the employees to collect information about their positions. So we had interviews with those individuals on the administration team and then also in your management. We've reviewed your current compensation system and your job descriptions and also what current policies you have in writing. We asked for the employees to complete position questionnaires. They came in very helpful. All of those were analyzed, and actually as I was making recommendations and talking through some of those talking points, we ended up having to go back to some of those, Amy and I, and talking through, all right, really what is the difference between this position and that position, and is it enough to make some pay grade separations? And so those end up being very critical tools for getting the employees' feedback in terms of what it is that they do. We solicited that market information. That market information then resulted in those graphs and charts that I provided you about a month ago, and that helps us understand where CLN is in comparisons to that market, and that helps me then identify what your salary ranges should be. And then I provided all of these recommendations to the library director so that she had a time to digest all of that information and provided me with some feedback. I will say that when you see the recommendations, if you haven't already, one of the items that probably is going to quickly pop out at you is the classifications or the job titles. And I do have some recommendations. I'm not sure if the organization is going to take those recommendations and implement them right away, or you might stick with some of the more traditional job titles that you've got, just because sometimes change is difficult and it's work in progress. This is, as a reminder then, the comparables that we used to help identify what your market is. And then also to summarize, this is your market findings. And so what you're seeing here is your minimums within your salary schedule, the average midpoint then, and then the third one is what your incumbents are earning in comparisons to the other organizations. And overall, what we found is that the salary ranges that you have just simply are not aligned with the market. There also just really is this question of where is the market point in those salary ranges, because some of them were very narrow and others were very, very very wide. And when you have that inconsistency, you never know really how long an employee needs to work until they get to that competitive market rate. And so it's not terribly surprising what we found, that the majority of the positions that you have needed to be realigned, even though you have some employees, and you'll see that on the far right hand side, you've got some employees that their compensation is doing okay. The organization, either they've been there long enough, or maybe there's some new hires where you've done some market research yourself to make sure that you can be market competitive. And so I'm not saying that all of your people are going to need a significant adjustment, but there certainly is a fair number of them that are going to have to be adjusted. So some of the challenges that we found: your salary schedule was developed more than a decade ago. We like to see salary schedules updated at least I call it just kind of a dip in the market to see how things are going once every 3 to 5 years, and you're well overdue for that. We don't know the methodology behind how it was developed. So, we can't ask questions about market rate and the design, that type of thing. So we don't know how it aligns with the external market. We have those very broad salary ranges in a lot of different areas. And we know that the salary schedule itself was not necessarily adjusted, even though some of the maximums have been pushed out. We also know then from the discussions that you are experiencing some very significant turnover. You've got low retention. And because of that, because people aren't staying as long, they can't grow and develop into the organization. And so there's really no opportunity for them to grow and progress, which is what you would like to see. And as a result, then you're hiring people from outside the organization, which is completely fine. But if you're going to be doing that, then there's an expectation in this current labor market that you're going to be paying them market competitive wages. And so you got to make sure that your salary ranges are aligned, because you need that not only for retention purposes, you want to hold on to the people that you have, but you also want that for your recruiting purposes as well. And then the last item, and we talked about this very briefly, but I think it is pretty critical for you. Your neighboring state, which is just a few minutes down the road, they are going to be going to a pretty sizable change in their minimum wage starting the first of the year. And your challenge to that is that even though you don't have to pay that rate of pay, the individuals who are going to be in your labor market pool, they suddenly can just go take a very short drive, and they are going to be able to earn wages simply because that state law is going to mandate it, and it is going to cause some challenges for you, and we needed to be cognizant of that. So overall recommendations, and I don't know if you have, Amy has the report. Have they received a copy of the report yet?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so you've seen this, so hopefully this is just an overview for you. We created a range model, and that was something that Amy and I talked about. Is steps the way to go? Is a step range model the way to go? Or is range the best model for you? And I determined that the range model is going to give you the most flexibility. It's going to allow you some opportunities for those merit adjustments, or those types of performance type programs in the future. But it also, I keep going back to the flexibility, because there may be years where you can afford more. There's years when you can afford less. And a step schedule really is very rigid, and it's very expensive. And that range model is going to offer you the flexibility that a step model does not. And I think that because we are going to be working to put your employees into the recommended ranges now over a period of time, you're going to need that financial flexibility, at least for the next couple of years. So when I built the schedule, I was cognizant of making sure that we're aligning your positions at the minimum. And then I'm also taking a look at that market point. When we get to the next slide, you're going to see that I've got some alternative recommendations, but we have some phasing that we're going to have to do. And so there were times when that market point might have been a little touch too high. And so I looked, during those times, I was looking at the minimums to make sure that at least at the minimum, those salary ranges are going to be competitive for you. We have an incremental range program here for you. So what that means then is that based upon what pay grade will be how wide those ranges are going to be. Pay grades A through J, or I'm sorry, A through G, those are the salary ranges that are a little bit lower in compensation, and they are a little bit more narrowly focused. And H through L is going to be your master's prepared positions. It's going to be your management position, your executive level, and you're going to need a little bit more bandwidth for those positions because you're likely going to be looking outside the immediate region to hire them. And so because of that, you might need a little bit more hiring power. And so I just determined that those positions then should have a little bit more of a broad range. I don't think you need anything more than a 40% range. And when you see them, and I think kind of that big culprit is that, that one very, very large range that you had, and what was the end result? What ended up really happening was we took the upper portion of that range, and that is really what the range now is for you. The 25% also, because those minimums are being elevated a pretty substantial amount, I do not worry that the ranges might be shorter than what the employees are used to, because the vast preponderance of your employees are going to be going to that new minimum rate. They have a lot of room now within their range to be able to progress and grow with the organization. Now, I do have a little bit of, I call it wiggle room between some of your pay grades. You will see that maybe the percentage between the pay grades, some areas are a little bit bigger than others. And that's, I did that because if the organization is ever going to grow and have to put new positions in there, there's a little bit of room in this way in the salary schedule so that we can insert new pay grades if that's needed. They're not there now. There isn't really a need to, but the percentage base is there. Simply the administration team would need to make contact with McGrath in the future. If we need to place, a new salary range in there, we can help you through that relatively easily. And we don't necessarily disrupt the rest of the salary schedule, although maybe some people are going to get new alphabetical pay grades. The other thing that I did was I isolated, and that's not really the best word, but it's the best way of describing it. I isolated the lower paid pay grades. So there's a little bit more percentage surrounding them. So as that minimum wage in your neighboring state, starts to elevate, and that causes maybe some living wage issues in your region, if there becomes a necessity to raise some of those pay ranges to help accommodate what's happening with that entry level position, you can do that without disrupting the rest of the salary schedule. There's some padding and some separation there. So I did that simply because you might need to elevate A, B, and C a little bit faster or a little bit more than other pay grades in the future. And I don't want there to be compression between your pay grades. So once again, that's an example of some extra space that I left in your salary ranges. The beauty of this is going to be that how the employees progress can either be done one of two ways. It can be done by a performance measure. And I will say that, you're going to want to make sure that you've got your administration team ready, willing, and able to do that, because merit and performance really truly does take a lot of time and commitment to be able to implement it, to train people, and then see it through. So in the meantime, if the organization isn't quite ready for that, range models can do across the board salary adjustments with, if you consider adequate performance, then if everyone is at an adequate performance, then everyone gets this percentage as a standard percentage. And then it's just a little bit, it's a little bit more flexible to what your individual needs are for the organization. All right, now I might have something accidentally popping up here on me. My computer chimed at me. Now, yep, and there it is. Okay, we don't need to see that. So what we did when I created your minimums, I initially costed it, and there are some positions, as you know, that really were very low in the market. And as a result of that, after having talked with Amy, what I did was actually, by the time I talked to Amy, I had developed two models. One was the standard minimum that you see where I have my recommended minimums. And then I also created what's called a temporary minimum. And what this is it is truly temporary. It is intended to be a short-term minimum that is either 5% or 10% under my recommended minimums. And it is a stepping stone for the employees to be able to reach that new minimum. And that is because there are some pretty sizable changes in employee wages, and you might need to do this over the period of 2 financial years. I will say though that, with this, there's going to have to be some management, because if you have existing employees in the temporary minimum zone, but you're bringing in new employees at the true minimum, that's not going to sit very well for your employees. And so if you're going to use the temporary minimums, I would say the entire organization is going to use it until such time that you can move all of your employees into the true minimum range. And then at that point, you're going to drop that temporary minimum off. It really allows for the employees to get a nice sizable salary adjustment here in this upcoming fiscal year, but it allows you to be able to space some of that implementation into the next fiscal year. Then that will allow you a period of time to be doing some financial planning for the difference. And I do want to stress that the intent is that is going to fall away. It has to go away if you're going to be competitive going forward in the future. And I would say that I know that you are not going to likely be able to do it in 2023, but I hope that you will be able to do it come 2024. All right. And my computer is frozen. Hang on, folks. Sorry about this.
Amy, do we have the recommendations that she's putting up there?
Yes. So it's in kind of the whole report,
Right.
and she's doing a summary, and then the salary schedules towards the very
I saw that.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna bear with me here. I need to stop sharing for a moment because my computer, when I hit that little glitch thing that you heard, that completely destroyed my PowerPoint here. Hang on. Sorry about that. Let's try that again.
It'd be helpful if we could have those PowerPoint slides as well.
You bet. Actually, Amy already has a copy of it, and so you will be able to take that. You'll be able to get a copy of that. She's got that available. So this is what the visual of your salary schedule is going to look like. And so I'm going to pick on the recommended title of library page. And so there is in the final report on the very end appendix, what you'll have is all of the positions, and how you're going to read this is the pay grade. This is the new pay grade A through L, and then you'll have current title and then recommended title. So you'll see what you currently have and what I'm recommending it's going to be called. I think the organization really can spend some time determining what they want those positions to be called. I don't think that it's going to make or break it, but I think that there's some opportunities there. So what I'm talking about here is this is my recommended salary range, and you see it a minimum and a maximum. There's also a middle number here, the midpoint number that I use to help create the salary schedule. But for the purposes of publishing this and making it available to the employees, what really is important is what is that range from the low end to the high end. This then becomes that temporary lane that I'm talking about. So whereas if you are a library page, my recommendation is that the organization is going to start this at $14.09 an hour, but because we are needing to phase in for financial purposes all of the employees to get into the salary range, we're going to start your individuals out at 1342. And so that's where many of them are going to be, somewhere between 1342, but obviously no less than 1408. And then all of those individuals then that are in this temporary zone this year, the hope is that they'll get to 1409 and then you can just get rid of this column. Now, it's not an issue in all classifications, but I created you a temporary minimum lane for all pay grades, regardless if, you know, you might have some incumbents that are well within their range and it's just not, it's not a problem or it's not a concern. But for some of those pay grades that are on the lower part of the salary schedule, you know, they're seeing some sizable shifts in their hourly rate, and that is necessary. In terms of position placement, and I don't know that I don't believe that we talked about this during my last time with you. This is often a question that employees ask, and it's why I'm bringing this up, because we might have employees in the room, and if we don't, they're certainly going to get a copy of the final report. We talk about what we do to help place a position, because it ends up being more than market. We utilize market because I have to make sure that your salary ranges are competitive, but we use other factors as well. We use that position analysis. And again, you know, and a good example was, all right, we have these two positions and some do this responsibility and some don't have that responsibility. And is it really enough to put them into two different pay grades? And that analysis helps us with that. And then you've got that internal comparability piece of, all right, all things equal, you know, all of your library managers, you know, should they all be pay graded together, or there's some real distinctive differences that would cause us to want to put them into different pay grades. You don't necessarily have compression as much, but certainly we don't ignore it. We look at it in all of our projects. So when I gave the recommendations, I provided it to the library director. She had an opportunity to look at it and provide feedback. So I feel pretty comfortable with the recommendations at this point, more comfortable enough to provide these to you so that you can make a determination on implementation, and then that information then can also be shared with employees. Now, part of this process has been, all right, you've got a new recommended salary schedule now. Now, what do we do with it? Because we certainly don't want you to go another 10 years and where you're not managing it. It is a living, breathing document, and it's always ever changing. And so comes some expectations with it. And the first thing is that those salary ranges need to be adjusted each year so that you are maintaining your competitiveness with the market. So even though if we go back to that example where the library page would be starting at $14.09 an hour, or it might be, we'll start it at let's just say $14.09 because that's what the true minimum is. That your other organizations are perhaps pushing that wage up, and we want you to be able to keep competitive with that, because that's one of the challenges that you've had over the last few years, is that the maximums were touched, but the minimums really weren't. And that will allow you to maintain that competitiveness in the market. We want employees to have an annual adjustment. We want them to be able to progress through the ranges. That's why we give them the ranges. We want them to be working towards that higher dollar that is available to them. And then there may be some times when you need to do an individualized, when I say individualized, a classification, individualized market adjustment. And I'm going to use a kind of an odd example here, but let's just say that for whatever reason, librarians, not even library managers, but librarians took a spike in the market. You can't find one. You're not really sure what's going on. And your administration goes out to the market and you suddenly realize, wow, something has happened where all of the librarians around us are being paid at a higher pay grade or at a higher salary range now. And if we don't do something, we're going to be at risk for losing our people, or maybe we already are, where it's a substantiated market trend that has happened. In that situation, you should have the flexibility to be able to change a classification into a differing pay grade. You might want to be calling us to talk through that with us to make sure that we concur with that. And I want to urge caution with that, because it's not a tool to try to get a person more money. It really is just simply trying to be responsive to the market to make sure that your system maintains competitiveness, which is why you probably want to call upon us and we'll help guide you through that. We do recommend that you do this every 3 to 5 years. It does not have to be substantial like what we did here because this was a complete reset of your model. But if you do a market update, and I would say every 3 to 5 years, depending upon the market, you might need to do it a little bit sooner. Others can wait maybe another year. But if you maintain metrics, your turnover rate and how long people are staying, those types of demographics, that's going to tell you internally if it's time to do a market adjustment or a market update to see if all of your salary ranges continue to be market competitive. And then, of course, finally, we have policy updates. We have some recommendations on policies that will be for your library administration to bring forward to you once you have the new system in place about promotions and percentage adjustments and, at what point do we put a position in a new pay grade, those types of policy items. So I recommend that you take a peek at that. The last thing I want to talk about now is your benefits because we were asked to take a look at your benefits, not necessarily your health insurance and how you are in comparing to the external market, but more internally and, perhaps you're experiencing some challenges. And so when I went through your benefits, it was really kind of interesting that the first thing that pointed kind of stuck out like a beacon to me was your category of employees that you have. And you have 4 different categories and they are listed on the sheet here. And it comes right out of your employee handbook. And so you have a category of full-time employees, then you've got your permanent full-time, you've got permanent part-time and coordinators, and then you've got permanent part-time, and then you've got another permanent part-time and based upon the hours. It's really quite complicated. And some of those employees in the part-time status don't necessarily qualify for the paid time benefit. You have a very, very high number of part-time employees. And so this becomes really important for not only your retention of employees, but also, being an employer of choice and, offering some of your part-time staff some additional benefit opportunities because they might be more inclined to stay working for you if they have certain benefits. Okay. So one of my recommendations, first of all, is to kind of clean this up and maybe simplify it a little bit more, and that you separate your category of employees as full-time or part-time. And then if you go into part-time, you're either going to be benefited part-time or you're going to be non-benefited part-time. Now, your health insurance qualifier is a little bit different. You've got a federal standard that you have to adhere to for 30 hours a week. And we're not here necessarily to mess with that. It's more what you do with your paid time and with your holiday benefits. So I broke it down into benefited part-time are going to be those individuals that work between 20 and 39 hours a week. And the non-benefited part-time, they're going to work less than 20 hours a week. They're probably not going to qualify for your state retirement system either, which is why I put that 1,000 hours annually. So, there might be some tweaking that the organization wants to do with this, but I hoping that if I can at least give you the skeleton of what I think that you should be doing, then you can probably tweak it a little bit more. So what that means then is that the benefited time off would change a little bit for certain groups, not necessarily everybody, but certainly the part-time individuals. So I'm not recommending any type of benefited changes for your full-time. Actually, I feel that you have a very generous vacation schedule for your full-time and your administration. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't think it's too enriched, but it's good. And there's absolutely nothing more that needs to be done with it. So really the focus became, what do we need to do for your part-time? And what I determined then is in the report, you'll see that I've got it broken down where your accruals of your vacation and your sick time now can be done by formula based on the total number of hours that you're working. And so if you work 20 hours a week, then you should be accumulating, half of the equivalent of vacation time. And if you're working 30 hours, it's going to be 75% of that accrual. Now, Now, this is going to be something that the library is going to want to, take some time to consider, because as people are accruing this time, it needs to be a funded liability on the books. And, so there's certainly a financial consequence to this. And so I don't feel that this is something that you're going to want to rush into, but you're certainly going to want to explore a little bit more. So I do feel that your part-time needs to have prorated vacation, prorated sick time, and prorated holiday as well. And as if you're prorating them, that means that they're equitable in that their accruals are going to be, their accrual rate is going to be the same as the full-time, but because they're of part-time status, they're never going to accrue as much as the full-time employees earn. And it just becomes a little, I would consider that to be more equitable. So that in a nutshell is what we have gotten done for you. I am available to take questions.
I wonder, this is Regina. I had mentioned earlier, so maybe people are waiting for me to jump in. This report was phenomenal. I can tell the depth of time that went into it, and I really appreciate the thoroughness of the report. I still don't quite understand compression, but I don't know that we want to devote time to that. It's probably my own issue. So maybe there are some hands being raised, because could you, reading the definition of compression and how you discuss it in the report is one thing, but maybe if you could just explain it, it would make a little more sense.
Sure. So compression is, well, there's a couple of different types of compression. Compression can be when you have positions that are of lower rank, for lack of a better word, that are earning the same amount of money as positions that are of a higher classification, and they're just really stacked on top of each other, and there really is no distinctive difference. Okay. Oftentimes we see that in industries that are not necessarily specific to the library. For you, the issue was more, well, your salary schedule was just, it was just not functional for you. And it to me, when I was looking at it, the hourly rates, the beginning rates just really did not, they didn't make, I'll be honest, they didn't make sense to me that, certain positions are being paid that amount of money, where, there's not a, there's more difference in responsibilities between, a position that might be in pay grade 1 to pay grade 2, but there really was no difference in that particular range. And so you had some compression, but I don't think it's not necessarily true compression. I think it was really just because of how your salary schedule had previously been built, because some of those old pay ranges just didn't have a lot of difference between them. And I am, our philosophy and our best practices with compensation methods is the pay grades need to be at least 5% different. And if they are less than that, then we really need to have a conversation about, should we collapse those together, and do those positions really belong in the same pay grade? You had some positions that just weren't far enough apart from each other, even though the responsibilities would have warranted for them to be a little bit more separated. The other kind of compression that you have, and this is something that you are going to be experiencing in the organization, is what I call in-range compression. When the ranges themselves are adjusted so much, what that is going to mean is that most all of your employees, they're going to cluster at the minimum end of the salary range, because how we put people in the ranges is putting them in the range commensurate with what their wage is without taking a decrease. So for most people, they're going to be getting a substantive increase and going to the minimum. That might mean then that you have a 4-year tenured employee that's going to be making the same amount of money as an employee who's been there for 6 months. And that is probably, I think, of all of the issues that you might be hearing about from the employees, that might be the one that concerns them the most of, I've been here for 4 years, so why am I making the same amount of money as the person who's only been here for a couple of months? And so how you resolve that is money. Okay, what we end up having to do is take that 4-year employee and we, by formula, push them a little bit further into the range so that there's some separation within the range, so that the new employees are towards the, towards the minimum, and then your, more tenured individuals are a little bit further up in the salary range. And that was not something that we considered doing for you, purely because of the financials, because right now 2023 is going to be, an implementation year for you, and likely 2024 is going to be the second part of that. Think that after that, you can talk through if you need to be pushing any of your long-term employees up, if there is any of that feeling of compression. But the reality is that some organizations simply cannot address it because you solve it with money. Does that help? Does that make sense to you?
That helps a lot.
Okay.
And the other thing that has helped a lot from your presentation today is to help me understand that the pink, not all of our positions are in the pink, which is what I thought when I read the report, and that would be kind of alarming that every single position needs a new, needs a temporary minimum because no one is in their proper market rate. So, the information on the benefits and things we could offer to our part-time employees is tremendously valuable. One question I wanted to ask you while we have you, and I think Amy can speak to it as well, but, and I know this wasn't particularly the focus of what you were asked to do, but given what you were looking at externally and internally, is it common for libraries to run on 75% part-time staff? Do you think that makes sense for this organization?
I can speak very briefly, and then I'll probably turn that one over to Amy, because that has, to me, that really is a board decision on how you want to run your operations. It's not all that uncommon. And we see some libraries that are much, much smaller than yours, and we've worked with libraries that are much, much larger than yours as well. You do have a fair amount of part-time. Probably, I would say yours is maybe the largest that we've seen of part-time, but there comes it comes with some benefit, right? It comes with maybe some higher amount of flexibility. And, I don't know why the business model was created that way. I am not in a position to tell you whether that is a good or a bad thing for your organization. We just didn't really touch upon that, and I'll turn it over to Amy.
And I think, and Melina might know this more, definitely libraries run on a variety of part-time. I've seen it closer to 60 to 65% of staff being part-time, versus full-time. So we're definitely on the high end from my experience. And that's one thing, just in the year and a half, we have added 5 more full-time employees. We added 3 in last budget cycle. And then we added 2 towards the end of the fiscal year, as we saw that we had some salary savings. And so we were able to add just a few more hours to 2 supervisor positions and created. So it's something that we're just going to be incrementally working on as it makes sense, because there is some operation need for part-time, but you can still, we also want a progression for people to be able to stay here. And so we want a pathway to some full-time positions. So I think that's definitely something we'll work towards, but it needs to be, does that position make sense? Does it make sense for that department? How does it look? So we've been gathering statistics for each of our libraries and each of our departments to be like, if they're open the same number of hours, each location should have a similar staffing model. And that wasn't always the case. And so we're starting to move to a more equitable staffing model, so that if you're open 32 hours a week, you should have roughly this number of staff hours and not have one have 20 more hours than the other. So.
Yeah, and I think the tightening up these ranges for me is extremely important from a parity perspective and our people, and it just needs to be objective. And the report doesn't really speak to us about that or tell us if we were out of whack, which is fine. But anyway, it's just important to be aware of.
I have a question, and I don't think I should turn my mic on because I think it makes it bounce around. So having to do with the compression and everybody in a category moving up to the temporary minimum wage. And as you spoke of, like, say, somebody that's tenured and somebody that's basically new, was that a question that was asked to the staff? How they would feel about that, or was that not in their questions?
No, that was not actually anything that we asked them, because we understand that that is a financial decision that to be made. There may be some personal feelings about it, but that ends up being a board decision on whether or not you want to or can address it. You know, unless I go back and look at, you know, the details of my costing sheet, to know, I do know that you've got some employees that are, you know, going to be in the range. Not everyone is going to be at the minimums. So, you know, I just want to, you know, kind of preface that, or not preface that, but just know that there will be some in the range. But no, whether or not you decide that you can afford to push people further into the range is going to be that's a financial decision. My recommendation to the organization, however, is that if that is something that you want to entertain, that we do it in a methodology that is going to be equitable, so that everyone is treated the same and we don't run any risk of any type of discriminate practices. And so if that is something that after I am, you know, off the call and you all keep talking, and that you want to be considering, then, you know, please let me know.
One of the things that I would like to say is that I didn't expect, I don't know, I have never done one of these before, so I didn't know. But I absolutely love the guidelines that you have for maintaining equitability, I guess I would say, and for continuing onward. And the fact that you are also saying, have said in several different ways, how available you are to help us stay on that path. And that was unexpected for me and fabulous.
We will be as involved. Number one, we will help with the implementation. We're available to answer questions. And if Dr. McGrath, she's the CEO of the company, if she were on this, usually what she says is, we're not attorneys, so we don't charge you for every 15 minutes. So we are absolutely available to answer any kind of questions that might come up during your implementation. And then we're available after. Part of our process is developing a professional relationship with the organization, because we want to be your partner. And if you have a compensation question, it's okay to pick up the phone or simply to email. I have a lot of long-term clients, and one that I talked to this morning when I was sitting in a car in Kansas, and he said, I got this issue. I just need to bounce it off of somebody, and we help answer those questions. When we start doing more formal work, you know, there might be, you know, some modest service fees, but generally speaking, if we've got to talk through some of these items and you come back and say, hey, we want to talk about getting rid of that temporary lane and what can that look like, just give us a call and we'll have a conversation, and then we can let you know what needs to happen from that point. And we'll be as involved, or we'll be as hands-off as you want us to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a reason for category A, we don't have an annual figure? And then my other question would be that the annual figure is a bit deceptive, isn't it, since the vast majority of some of these categories are part-time positions?
Yeah, so let me just pop up I wonder, I think I lost my, let's see. Oh, I do have it. Okay. Yeah, so in category A, I left it hourly simply because you won't ever, that's not a position that is, I don't believe it's ever going to be full-time. You can, as an organization, decide if you want to eliminate the annuals, because you are right, there could be a perception issue if, unless they understand that that's annualized based on 2,080 hours. This has been provided to the library administration in Excel form, so you can modify it as you need to, and you might then determine that you're going to take off all of the salaries or the annualized salaries and leave everything in hourly form. I would urge some caution to that, though, when you get into some of these higher pay grades, because when you're, the level of supervisor and manager and your administration, most times those individuals are looking at it from an annual basis. So we normally will just give it to you in both ways. And honestly, I guess I can't even really answer why I didn't put annual on there. I could update it and I could send it back to Amy very, very easily. Was there another question in there?
You answered it.
Okay.
Okay, so those other numbers, the ones below it are the annual, that's the annual. Okay, I'm getting it.
Yep, this is annual. So if assuming a person works 2,080 hours a year, this is what their annual amount would be. Now you might have, sometimes we even see monthly on here. So really it depends on what it is that how you want to display it.
Any other questions for Melina?
This is the most clean cut salary schedule this library has ever seen, I think. So it's really cool. It's really cool.
And you helped make it happen. So, this is a great thing for the library. If this is adopted, this is wonderful. I believe that a commitment like this to your employees is a commitment to your organization, because it's going to come back into your programs and services in a way that you probably aren't necessarily expecting. And I believe that your employees will be absolutely grateful for this to happen should you adopt it.
The one little box that showed the percentage of turnover in staff for the last 2 years was a tad breathtaking. But
sure.
Also, it put numbers to what we knew.
Isn't that something? And, when you look at what your best year is the year of COVID. And that is highly consistent with many, many turnover calculations that I run. There were a lot of organizations that everyone just took a collective hold their breath and we're going to wait to see, and they didn't make a move because they just didn't know what was going to be shaking out with the economy. And that is, I think, really very true to many industries all across the United States. But yes, and what's unfortunate here is that this 25% is only based on through October. You still have an entire quarter to add to those numbers. And so, hopefully this will help curb that for you, and you will find that you're going to be saving in other areas because you're going to, help your turnover rates for sure.
Another question, Madam Chair. What access do we have to use to try to begin to implement this? Does this complete the contract? And do we go back on an hourly basis if we had questions? How does it work?
Are you talking about McGrath services?
Yes.
So we are available to answer any kind of question that comes up, and we don't charge for any of that. When we get to a point where the organization says we need to add positions or we need to change the pay grade or we need to, do something to the structure, that typically is when we start billing, and we let you know ahead of time, this is how much we expect it's going to cost based upon the amount of time. But even on an annual basis, we have some existing clients who call and say, all right, what do you know about the market and what do you think, where should we be coming in for that annual salary, cost of living adjustment? That is something that Dr. McGrath offers to all of our clients free of charge. Not everyone takes advantage of that, but some use it on an annual basis very, very consistently. So really, unless you are going to make a position change or a structure change, or until you're ready to do a market update, we're available to answer questions at no charge.
Thank you, Counselor Generous.
Yeah, and my understanding was you will help with the implementation plan.
Yeah, we can help with the implementation plan, again, as much or as little as you want. And, Amy or the administration team just simply needs to reach out. Now, what does that mean? I'll give guidance. I'm expecting that the administration team is going to be doing the implementation, but it's very possible that someone calls me and says, oh, the employees, they have a lot of questions. Can we do a Zoom call, or can you do a Zoom recording for the employees to explain something? Absolutely, we're available to do that. We just got to work that into our schedule a little bit. And in fact, that is very typical that happens, because you've heard my presentation. You understand a lot of the background work that I've done now to come up with these recommendations. But some of these topics are completely foreign to your employees, and they may not necessarily understand everything. And so if the library administration plans on doing some sort of an education campaign, with the rollout, we certainly can be available virtually to help answer those questions that might come up, or presentation form.
Right. I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much, Melina.
You're
This was very
welcome.
helpful.
You're very welcome. And if there's anything else that you need from me, please feel free to reach out. And thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Taking her seat. I just, we're still talking about the still item. Or do you?
No, we will, if we have a few more things we have to deal with. And so we probably will need to go over, but that's the agenda item that we are on.
Okay, well, this is where I should thank you earlier, but I feel like I have when we had our prior discussion. I'm very happy that you got this done during your tenure here with the library. This is so very, very important. And as I think I've said, eye-opening to the degree to which some of the positions are out of market. So I know that we don't necessarily have the specificity, but I just want to better understand. Well, I guess I have two questions. First, I guess we're committed to this stuff. And we getting into the pink. How
So that is. We would be able to take anybody who each of those positions. Temporary minute. And then I believe what Melina had also recommended is we do have some staff either because they've been here for a while, or there were some positions, so some of our manager and coordinator positions were not out of market. So the minimum was not changing very much. So she recommended if you're not getting a big jump because your minimum increased, is that they would recommend a 3% across the board. I think typically our past increases have been about 2% for our annual increases. So when we did the cost analysis, so when Melena first came to me with the two proposals, which was the true minimum and then the temp minimum, the true minimum was about $375,000 to implement. The temp minimum was, when we redid our calculations, was about 190,000. So that's the 135 plus, or actually, okay, 195,000, because it's the 135 that was already budgeted plus the 60,000 that we're asking for in the additional carry forward. So if we adopt this Appendix A salary schedule, that would get that would take 195,000, and it would get everyone up to the temp minimum. And then for those that did not get any bump because they were already in the minimum, it would give them a 3% increase. So that 195,000 takes into account the 3% increase for everyone else. And I think there's really, I want to say there was about 15 people that that would get, 15 to 18, I want to say, that would get 3%. And then the rest, they were already under minimum. And so they would get an increase to minimum. Now, Melena talked a little bit about compression, and our admin team definitely talked about that. She was out of town for 2 weeks prior to, so she basically left me the report and a really lengthy spreadsheet. And then she was out of town for 2 weeks and just got back in town a few days ago. So her and I didn't talk about compression, but our admin team did. And having gone through this at a prior organization, that can be an issue when you raise everybody in the classification up to the minimum. And again, you have somebody who's been here 5 years and somebody who's been here 6 months now making the same. So I had a formula from a prior salary study. So we did look at that, and that affects maybe, I think that was another 12 to 15 staff that would just get a small, so depending on their years of service, got somewhere between a 1% and a 4% to get them a little bit higher than the true minimum. So if they've been here 5 years, and actually in some cases, somebody had been here 9 years and was going to make the same. So one of our circulation specialists, been here 9 years, because all of the circulation specialists would get a big bump up to 1505. Currently, they start at 1326. So it's taken somebody a long time to get, almost nobody was up to $15 an hour, but we had 2 individuals, 2 circ specialists that were already over $15, but that's because they've been here 9 to 10 years. So if we gave them another couple percent increase, that would at least start to spread them out from that minimum. And so that was incorporated into that 195,000.
So are you talking about in addition up to the 3%, or are you considering that 3% helps with?
So that was taking, so for some people, it took 1% to get them to the minimum. So this would now be applying, something else among that. And or in some cases, it took 3% to get to the minimum, but if they've been here 9 years, right, and it took somebody else 20% to get to the minimum. So they got, and that was a formula base. Now, what I'd like to do is, now that Melena's back, is go back and ask what her formula would be, because my formula was based on, like I said, a prior compensation study, but that was only going to be a few $1,000s to get people a little bit more spread out. I think it was going to be, it was not very much too, because for many of our staff, this will be a big bump, but we would hate for those that have been here a long time and have been working to be like, oh, that was a whole lot of nothing for me. Sorry, I don't mean it like that. So it's not going to be huge, because also when you spend a lot of money, we were so out of whack. So to give everyone $2 an hour, and then give somebody else another $2 because you've been, but we could give them a few percentage above that increase. So that was taken into account. But like I said, so when Melena and I talked, going back to kind of one of Regina's original questions, yeah, it was going to take about $350,000 to $375,000 to do the true minimum. Now, what we're not asking today, but I hope everyone, the board would sit with for a while, is the paid time off recommendations. Because where that will affect our budget isn't just, she talked about it being a funded liability, but we currently budget at, because we have a lot of part-time staff that don't have accrued time off, we budget at 83% of those salaries. 87, thank you. 87% of those salaries. So if we're now giving them accrued time off, we need a budget closer to 100% of our salaries. So that's probably another, I think when the last calculation was a couple years ago, it was about 100,000, I think.
Okay.
So that would be another $100,000 if we want to do paid time off, which I would highly recommend, but this might have to be a phased approach. I mean, we're doing a lot to even give us to a temp minimum, you know, because we are spending that 195,000. I won't be here, but I would highly hope and recommend that next fiscal year, we adopt the minimum, you know, as the next change. And if the board wants to consider using some additional carry forward, but we have to just be mindful that every chunk is now an increase going forward. So now our salaries and benefits are always going to be this much higher. And if we add even more, it's going to be, you know, so it'll always be that chunk. And so we just want to always be able to sustain that and not promise what we can't deliver 2 years from now. So we feel very confident in saying we can deliver the temporary minimum now in our current budget. And we like the true minimum to be in the net considered in the next budget cycle. So just to say, the next item was the adoption, and I know that's the one that we didn't put action item. We would really love, if not today, to then either re-add this to Thursday's agenda, because our staff have already waited a month for their annual increase. They normally get that in October, so they haven't gotten their annual increase this year. So I know that's a lot of information to digest, but we are really wanting to get these recommendations in time for the November paycheck at the end of November.
Let's, since we're on a roll here, what do you think about in extending the meeting? Can everybody do that?
Well, I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting, 15,
Let's go
5:30 to 5:30.
Okay, yeah, then there's not a lot that will take the time. This is worth, so it's been moved to extend the meeting till 5:30. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, yay. Okay, thank you. All right, more comments that people would like to make.
I just have probably what would be a silly follow-up question, but when you're talking about these percentage increases, none of them, I mean, they're all going to be within the range that's listed in this report.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, nothing would take anybody, I mean, nothing, it would still be within the minimum and maximum.
So I hear you that staff has been, you know, really looking forward to this report. Don't we have to reopen the budget to have the different numbers in? I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of confused.
So here's what we can do. So to do the additional carry forward allocation, that does require a budget hearing. Right now, if we adopted this prior to that, which is, I know, a little bit backwards, but we have enough money to fund this new salary schedule for 11 months because we're only $60,000 short, and we pay every month salary wise. Let's look at the September financials. You know, $208,000. So this gets us through halfway through September. So this gets us all the way almost to September 15th on the new salary schedule. So if we have the budget hearing next month to approve this, we're still well able to fund this current year fiscal budget.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? Yes. So yes,
It's up until September.
and that's why we wanted to have them side by side so that we're not asking for the salary schedule without a way to pay for it for the full year. But we can well pay for it for many, many months.
Approximately, like, just say the circulation or library page, if that's what they're going to. The temporary minimum being 1342, approximately, what would it be for somebody that's been here 4 years? Because that is a big concern of people getting the same, too close in the same
I
amount.
think it would have been then, okay, so for example, so 1196 is what the current circ assistant or library page is. So anybody who started in the last year is making 1196. So they would, so everybody would get bumped up to 1342. Now, if we have someone who's been here several years, we're saying they get for sure bumped up to 1342. And then I think for like a 4-year employee, it was like 3% in addition to that. And then the highest we went up to was 5% if you had been here 9+ years. So I think we had like for 2 to 4 years, it was 2%. It was like 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and then it was like a 9+. And like I said, this was for those that were already either a little bit under the minimum or had just gone over, and now everybody else is coming up to them and they've been here a long time. What this doesn't take into account is, so for example, we have a manager and their minimum just got bumped up to 21.22, and let's say most of them are all making $23 an hour. Does that make sense? And they've all been here for a few years. They're going to get just the straight across 3%. Does that make sense? So if you were already well above the minimum and the minimum didn't change a ton, then you're just getting a straight 3%. But we did go through and look at this compression formula to see how it would affect.
That makes sense.
Does that
spread them out?
No, it really makes sense. It just doesn't seem like that big of a spread for people that are new and people that have been here. But I don't know what the spread is right now with them either.
Well, and that's where we have kind of, and this is what Regina's been alluding to, our ranges have been pretty lopsided. So one thing that's buried deep in the report, she talked about now the ranges in like A through G are 25% from the minimum to maximum, and then 40% in higher than G. What they had been before was somewhere between 30 to 80%. So we had some ranges that were 80% between minimum and maximum. So this does really tighten up those ranges, but it doesn't currently, we didn't have anybody, even with tightening them up, nobody's outside the maximum right now. Now, eventually, because we have tightened them up, we will need to talk about, and she has some recommendations in there for what to do if you reach the maximum, but nobody is currently over the maximum, even with these new tightened up. On the flip side, we also, in some ways, moved the range because it might have been like this, like the minimum and maximum. Now the minimum's here and the maximum's here for some of the ranges, if that makes sense. So we really raised the minimum, but we didn't have to raise the maximum too much because we were already really high.
Of course we were. I'm going to ask 2 questions or ask a question and then, so this isn't about money. This is about the titles. I mean, I don't see managers being called branch supervisors. We've just worked so hard not to call our branches branches.
Right. And so we said, this was part of a report. This was the research they found. So we said we would take the research because that's what we paid them for. But most of the title recommendations, there's a ripple effect. So I think like even with library page, I don't know the history, but I think they were called pages
1,000 years ago.
Many years ago, and then moved away from that. So we're not sure we want to go back to that. Same with, I don't know how great it's going to feel to our staff that currently have a manager title to then get changed to a supervisor title.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily plan to, well, I'm speaking for the admin team. We talked about this and the titles. We made just a couple of adjustments because in B and C, there's now, they had recommended a library assistant 1 and library assistant 2. I think we'll go with circ specialist and circ specialist 2. And I think maybe that 2 didn't get quite, it was left off of C. So that's a new, I guess the other thing to say is we now have 13 pay grades. So 13. We counted, and we used to have 9. So we do have, and part of that was that meant that we had several staff grouped together, or job titles, I should say, grouped together, that maybe shouldn't have been grouped together, that
Yeah.
did need a little more differentiation because their duties were very different, or there was different experience and degree requirements. So this does,
That was
Um,
very noticeable.
yeah.
The other thing I would like to say, having been on this board for a long time, is knowing that things were out of whack and how, or I don't know, inconsistently they were dealt with. How, with a, it was never considered that we turn to a consultant, which is insane after listening to this. But the cleanup that we have to do is dramatic. And that became so apparent to me in her very first PowerPoint. I was like, oh no, and so what we're seeing is a very dramatic jump that we should have been making incrementally in the last few years, and we simply did not know how. It is absolutely incredible to hear somebody who's got an organized approach and who can, which is the consulting firm, and who encouraged us several times throughout this to make sure that we maintain an organized approach. That we don't jump off and do, kind of, oh, well, we've got all this and now let's go and do what we were doing before. But that we turn back to them and say, we're having these issues, how can we identify those so that we are fair? It is, once again, I'd like to turn us back to the percentage of turnover is absolutely untenable. I mean, it's just, we're not giving the public what they deserve by having that amount of turnover. And we're not giving our staff what they deserve as a place to work. So at any rate, that's all I have to say. Those are my comments at this point in time.
And appropriately so, Katie, thank you. The other thing I'm looking at, I think it's on page 16, where we talk about using the range model, which is, I think, the recommendation we're hearing from you all.
It wasn't a recommendation. That's what they used.
Right, because this is exciting. And just as you described, by, rather agreeing that we're gonna increase salaries, isn't the end of the process. Because it's very descriptive in here about saying you really need to be very consistent in how you describe the job. I was trying to find the exact wording. But there were phased implementation. But there were better words that I can find at this moment, but it clearly was you don't just get to whatever title you want, so give them the money and be done. In order to evaluate what category you believe in, there's a lot more detail to be filled in. And that really isn't our job as a board, but it is to allow the time for the staff to in fact make these things happen. It means we trade time with the staff could be doing something else. We're just long overdue in getting it done. But I have to practice that our job to say to administration is be sure we follow the council here on how we describe the positions. And that the employees are set up for success. They understand what the goal is, and if you meet that goal, then that category fits, and you have through. So, I can't find the exact words, but I was struck by when I read through it. I thought, oh man, this isn't done yet. Just getting started.
And that was another one of my questions, to be sorted out. As I looked at, they have all the recommendations that for a maintenance type program or for moving on, and what are board responsibilities in that, and what are administrative responsibilities, so that we don't get down in the weeds, but we also don't neglect the duties that we have to make sure that our compensation packages are appropriate. That will come with a little bit of time, and I'm sure they'll be clearer about it. Okay, anything else?
Let me come back to the range model description on page 16, because there are the words I was trying to find. The 3 bullets underneath that range model paragraph on page 16 that clearly articulated performance objectives. You, administration folks feel like we have those in place now?
Yes, in twofold, we do, I mean, in the job description, there are kind of outlined, the scope and responsibilities, but then each year we have an annual performance. And those, we use metrics and objectives isn't the right word. It's goals. Yeah, and so for this position, competencies, that's what we use. So for each position title, these are competencies, and we go through and have the managers rank them on the competencies. The staff can do a self-evaluation, and then we set goals with each staff member. So yes, we do have those clearly articulated.
All those 3 bullets.
Mhm.
Because I know that's something we've talked about over the years with how do you evaluate somebody? And are we doing it? I know we did it annually. Are we doing it this style that's been recommended by our consultant? With these goals in mind.
I will say, if you look on page 19 and 20, one of the things that they recommend for moving forward, so what this library's typically done is an annual merit increase that's happened kind of in conjunction with the new fiscal year. And so they're actually recommending that you essentially have 2 different adjustments, and you could do it at the same time or not. One is cost of living, essentially. That's the salary schedule adjustment. That's when you're looking at the market and using the national metrics on cost of living. And then the second would be a performance measurement. Now, this library isn't funded enough to say, okay, we have 5% and you could do 2.5 for cost of living and 2.5 for merit, but you could start to more divvy it out what we've currently been doing, but that would be a recommendation that's set forth, and that would be the admin and board working together on. But to keep it in check, you do need to be making some adjustments that aren't just, because part of what we've done is just merit the last several years, and then that's where we get really out of whack with the minimums, unless we're coming with a new proposed salary schedule.
Wasn't sure if you were finished, Judy.
Sure.
In some regards, this report is actually quite scathing. I mean, some of the
Yes.
things. that it says. And, I know that people that may listen to this meeting and don't have the benefit of this report, one of the phrases in it that I would like to highlight is on page 11, where it says employees do not expect higher than average salaries, just a compensation system that pays a fair wage for the skills, education, and responsibilities of the position. And I, for one, think we owe it to our staff to provide them with employment that absolutely pays a fair wage. So I don't know if my fellow board members are ready to move forward with it or not, but I would move that we adopt Appendix A as the recommended compensation and classification system for this library.
Okay, it's been moved to adopt Appendix A as the what?
Well, I just read off the title as the compensation and
Oh, recommended
classification system
system.
for this library.
Okay. So it's been moved to adopt Appendix A as the recommended compensation and classification system for this library. Discussion.
Strike recommended. We're accepting the recommendation.
Then
Discussion.
on that is the recommendations, then we start with the pink category. We need to name that, I think, as becoming effective.
It's called the temporary minimum. That's the column.
Okay, when does that become? If this motion goes forward, we accept this recommendation. When does this begin?
Well, we would implement it with the November paycheck, but we had said, because we had budgeted for the full fiscal year, so it would be retroactive to October 1.
Which is a current standard.
Yeah, so we're not, and what that would mean is there was already an October paycheck, but it would take, if you worked 30 hours and let's say you got $1 raise now, we'd go back and pay you that 30 hours from October at $1 higher, but that would be included on the November.
That all fits within the 195.
Yes, yeah, because it was for the full 12 months.
And Judy, to answer your question, I felt like in making the motion that we adopt this compensation and classification system, that we therefore are taking, the temporary minimum as suggested. That would mean it would be implemented.
And then what I was headed for, being sure of that, Regina, was that's this year's version. What we're gonna do. Are we clear on what we're gonna do the next year?
Well, I think the recommendation would be that you drop the pink. And then you just have the actual minimum, but there would be need to be in the next budget talks and cycle. How much does that now cost? Melena gave us, the staff, a costing spreadsheet because it takes each individual person and then the recommended, but we then turn that into, because she's not taking into account all of the benefits that we also have, which are a percentage, some of the Percy and so forth. So we put that into the spreadsheet that Janelle keeps track of to do a true cost analysis. And that's where actually some of ours was coming in slightly under what she had recommended, but that was just because she had a different vacancy savings and, some of that regard. And so, but that would just be the recommendation, and that would certainly be something for you all to be talking about at the next, during the next budget cycle.
That would be, so then if we slide over a column to minimum and look over at the end of page 27, the total there looks like it's about 104,000. Oh, that's exactly. So what's the total anticipation of? So for
if we went for the regular salary range,
not today, but by next year, we're headed there.
then they would have to work that out. But if we did it this year, it would be 375,000 extra, right?
Roughly, it was somewhere between, she gave me a number, but she had overestimated a few things, so her estimation was 390, but we were coming in under that. So because we knew right away, we didn't have that much money, we didn't do the individual analysis for that. So what it would be is, if you adopt it now, it's taking that 195,000. So the difference between, let's say it was 350 to do the minimum, so it'd be another 155,000 next year.
And that's kind of what I want to.
But that's just a general, we'd have.
Agreed, but some range of what we're headed for is by adopting one, we need to be ready to carry on the next year. And by next year, the minimum will probably be higher than it is this year.
And it can also change by next year because we may have turnover in positions, and right now we may have somebody who's in the mid-range. And then when we hire at the minimum. So sometimes and I'm not saying we want that to happen. This is hopefully to help stem some of that. So what I'm saying is this is only an estimate, and it only becomes more of a reality once we look closer to that time, who's actually in the position, what's their current rate of pay to the new minimum.
Which includes our search for a new director. But the salary's gonna need to be there too. Okay, just want to be sure I'm looking at least 2 years as we board look at the schedule. Because I'm really glad to have one. This is certainly more constructive than we've had before. Just want to set us up for success, and we can do this. And we know now we need to do it, so we have 12 months to get ready for the next round.
11.
12 months after that, there'll be another.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that if we do pass this today, it doesn't mean that you have to next year move up. I'm just throwing that out there. It's not like you're starting the vehicle, it's gonna just keep rolling downhill. I mean,
That's fair.
it's like she said, it's about the money. If the money's there, then you can move up, but it's not a guarantee. So I'm just saying, I understand what you're saying, that we need to have our heads prepared, but it also doesn't mean that we have to. Right?
Same thing to get to.
I mean, if we pass this, it doesn't mean next year it has to be that.
No,
It's recommended,
It's
obviously,
recommended,
and
yes, that we
yeah.
look at it. We certainly would can look at
absolutely,
it.
yeah. It's just that if we pass this right now, it's not passing anything for next year.
correct. A new salary schedule should be brought with the next
Yeah,
budget cycle.
exactly.
And the salary schedule that will be adopted will be the temp minimum is the minimum until the board approves otherwise.
Yeah, that just sounds less daunting.
Good point, because we haven't even looked at the maximum column.
Yeah.
So.
Okay,
Save
so-
yourself, okay.
I understand the need to pass something super soon, if people haven't gotten their raises yet for the year and Christmas is coming up. But I think we should delay it until Thursday, just because it wasn't on the agenda as an action item, prior to this morning, or well, this afternoon.
It does say new salary approval. So it was, I think it was pretty clear that that's what we were looking at. I mean, I agree. I mean, I understand it didn't say action item, but it did say approval.
So I
Yeah.
mean, I would like to wait until Thursday, and I would like to do it then, so people this can
Mhm.
get going and people can have money for Christmas. I just would like to, I haven't even had a chance to read it, and yeah, but I'm not sure, but I think, is it open meeting laws or Robert's rules that if you're gonna change the agenda for like an action item, it needs to be something that can't wait. I think it could wait until Thursday, and I don't have any problem with voting on it then.
Well, I just want to say, I appreciate where you're at, Rochelle, and I just want to speak to why I made the motion. And if the request is that it be tabled, that's fine. But I have been uncomfortable for a while. I would venture to say years with our current salary structure. I think it is opens us up to liability. Surprised that there's not. I don't really want to say more about it in a public meeting, other than the fact that I am and have said that I do not think our current compensation and classification is fitting for this system. I am much more comfortable with this one, which is why this board member is already saying, hey, let's adopt it. But if my fellow board members need more time, I can understand that.
I'm gonna look real quick on tabling.
Okay, because Katie, you are thinking if we delay this, and I think that's certainly worth exploring. Our meeting now is 2 to 4. Do we need to allow extra time in the next meeting to finish this up? Can the board members do that? Because I think we already have the 2 to 4 time booked with a consultant coming in. I know that comes up the next topic, our for helping recruit a new director. And she consuming most of the time on Tuesday, Thursday.
Yes, but my recommendation would be to put it as the first agenda item, and then that way the board can be in an executive session for the rest of the time. June will be having a variety of meetings, so she can be flexible. She's here at our disposal, so to speak. So if we shifted, yeah, and hopefully, I mean, if there'll be new discussion by Thursday, but hopefully if this has been the bulk of the discussion, then primarily it's, so it may just need to be, I'll defer to Katie, 10 to 15 minutes for that particular agenda item.
10 to 15 minutes for our consultant,
No, I'm sorry, for,
this topic.
right.
And that's my point. We have another resource person coming in. We don't want to do short term her. Having first time we've all met her in person, to capitalize on the time she's come here. It's probably our only time we'll have direct contact with her. She'll be with us. Or it takes to get a new employee. So I'm prepared to spend more time on Thursday or length of the meeting now, 24 hours or more ahead. A timeline that capitalizes on this consideration and her expertise that she's flown in to give us.
Okay, we don't table it. What we do is postpone it. It's a motion to postpone to a certain time. So we would say we would postpone the motion until Thursday.
So does Rochelle make that motion?
Somebody can make the motion.
I can do that. Madam Chair, I move that we postpone the motion that's on the floor now till Thursday, November 17th. First item on the agenda.
Okay, it's been moved to postpone the motion, and I don't know whether there's discussion anyway. It's been moved to postpone the motion that's on the floor until Thursday, first item on the agenda, Thursday the 17th, until first item on the agenda. We've already had discussion. Takes discussion. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of postponing this motion? Okay. So the motion, is that correct? Are there any nays? Okay. So the motion has been postponed to the beginning of the meeting on Thursday. We will send a revised agenda. And my suggestion is that we extend the meeting from 2 to 5. Is that a consensus? Right, we need to make sure that June has plenty of time, and we have plenty of time with her, because there's a lot of things we're talking about. Okay, that sounds good.
Let me be sure, we all have this material now in front of us. And the printed colored version at the library, because I'm printing mine in font color. So we really have final version to study and approve on Thursday. Thank you.
Do I need to extend it?
Oh, yeah, we probably should extend it for 15 minutes.
There's another group here at 6.
But,
Oh,
There's another group in here at 6.
okay, 15 minutes. We're gonna get it done in 15 minutes.
well, and then you guys have to rush around to.
Okay.
I will that we extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
Okay, the trustee education, Jim McNall could not come on today, so he has suggested that it was voted on.
Oh, no, extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
Oh, we didn't go back a year.
We
The
didn't
original.
extend, we didn't? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just now, no, just.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's been moved to extend the meeting for 10 more minutes. All those in favor? Sorry, I am. Skip that.
Thanks, Janelle.
Yes, I appreciate that very much. Okay, so Jim McNall can come to us and give his presentation on, I think it's December 1, which is a Thursday.
And it's on our calendar currently.
And so we have we said yes to this? We haven't said yes to this, have we?
Would hurt to reaffirm it. I think we were looking for. a
I
time.
proposed to him, because he had said he could do December 1st or 2nd. I think you had said propose December 1, 2 to 4, and he said he can do that.
Okay, is that going to work for everyone? All right. And it will be here at Post Falls. Then I wanted to give you we added to the agenda the recruitment process, and I just wanted to give you a quick update on what we'll be doing. I talked with June on Sunday, and we will be looking at, just in general, we will be looking at redoing our recruitment brochure, which is our main form of advertising. We will be looking at our timeline. And we will do it in an executive session, and then I've asked to have on our agenda also for next Thursday, some time to talk about it after we've made some decisions, some time to talk about those decisions in the public part of the meeting. And when we'll put action item next to them, just in case, for example, a timeline, we decide we want to have a motion for the timeline of what we're going to do, or we need to have a motion. So so that we can come out of executive session and then talk about the next steps that will be then in the minutes, and the public will be knowledgeable about them. And that's all I have for the moment.
Madam Chair, I'd like to add to that then, because for our newbies, welcome to this process. Remember, I told you there'd be a bunch of meetings. It would be helpful for all of us, I think, to have a copy of June's Vita, again, to remind us who she is and what she's done. How hard is that to resurrect your files? We had one long ago.
Yeah, we did.
Being good librarians, hopefully you can find it. Because I think, I'm excited. I've never even met the woman before, except on Zoom. And I think that the time to interact with our board is really special and important, particularly when I think the timeline that we're dealing with and the circumstances to find somebody is even more challenging than last time. So I want to be sure we've tuned up for that. Same thing with the brochure. We're looking at redoing it or reviewing it.
Did they get the brochure yet? Yeah, they did. You guys got it in your email.
Yeah, then I need to go back and dig it out and get it ready to look at, to bring with me.
It was just recently resent.
Right, but my responsibility is to go find that, have it with me and be ready on Thursday to begin to look at it.
And the other thing too, also to look at is the contract that you received last time. that will also detail what our steps will be.
So brochure, contract, VITA are things that we, you know.
And we can see if we can find her resume type thing. I don't
I
know.
think they call it VITA or resume, whatever it is. VITA, VITA is one version, another is resume.
Okay, well, we don't have time to discuss that wording right now. We got the idea. Okay. So that's it. Are there any other questions about what's going on Thursday? This is we're hurrying up, but this process is, she's not at all unclear about the next steps we should take.
But she's ahead of us then. She's had some time to think about it and part of our board hasn't. So there's just some absorption time here that's not to be ignored. Do we have a job description that she's going to be reviewing with us for what we're?
We passed our job description last time. We're not reviewing it. It is the job
I
description.
just have to get all this back in my head. And then do we have time to visit with her that evening? We talked about that. Is this the moment to decide that?
That I don't know.
I think that was on my plate, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that was for two social events coming up. Regina was working on one, I was working on the other.
Yes, and we can take a moment to talk about it afterwards, after the meeting. The social event.
Okay, but, all right, I think when we were doing with the consultant in a public meeting, we can talk about, identify the fact that the board may try and visit with her for dinner. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But I think it should be a public piece of information. Okay,
Okay, we will attempt to do that. We will attempt to visit with her, but I don't know what's, happening, so I
which
can't
need to
say.
talk to the board about, so I
Yeah.
know what to go do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so by brochure, you're not talking about this, right?
No, it is the brochure. It says,
Because I downloaded it and it just came up with, it's like, I guess I could try again, but way to get a paper copy.
I can certainly, I can print it off. I think we can do that in my office.
can you do that now? I think I may have one in my stuff I could hand her.
You do. But otherwise we can do that here at the end.
Okay.
The sub-file is dangerous.
Yeah, I know, I know. Okay, I think that everything else we're okay on. We've got the special and regular meeting dates. So far, I don't think that there's anything else that we need to talk about on this agenda.
Would you walk us through the things we need for Thursday again? My list shows you're gonna send us a VITA.
My suggestion is you read the contract again, so it's the scope of work,
This is the person who this contract is dealing with. We're up on media on Thursday.
right?
He's hired to do this. Good.
And there is the brochure that we had from last time that we will be talking about and working on.
The job description is also in our files already.
Yes, you have the job description that we did.
My stuff pile.
Right, it came to us very recently. And the only other thing we'll be talking about is a timeline, and you don't need anything for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll see if we can find Shu's thing, talking about what she's done. All right, that's good. Then if there's nothing else.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, it's been moved to adjourn. All those in favor?
Fine.
All right, thanks.
Then what do we do about the social